Agenda.
We're going to call to order the regular meeting of the Alliance Board of Trustees for Monday, May 21st, 2018. Clerk, please call roll.
Mayor Sullivan.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Drystad.
Present.
Trustee Farrell.
Present.
Trustee Carabas.
Present.
Trustee Waugh.
Present.
Trustee Miller.
Present.
Trustee Browning.
Present.
All right, please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll take a brief reflective moment of silence, please. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please?
I move we approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And the agenda is approved, 7-0. Thank you. Is there a sheriff's report tonight?
He said he would not be here tonight and said to tell you that the speed trailer has been fixed, it's up and running, and they'll be placing it around strategic areas around town, starting with 2nd and Avenue near Bowling Park, and that he had not heard of any issues in the parks over the weekend, and starting this next weekend, they would have extra staff up and running on the weekends.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to staff reports. All right, let's turn over to our finance director.
And before I go into the transparencies, I would like to just make a note of notification. This is from MIN, the Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska. Last year they had, we received a $22,000 credit, as part of their year-end fiscal year. So this year we might get a potential $58,000 based on those numbers. And Jill might have more on that, but that's just letting us know. And then it has to be approved by Finance Department, and then it will be, we will expect it around June, sometime in June. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
How do I get so more transparent?
Oh, I don't know what that picked up
Yeah.
there, didn't it? Whoops.
We're working on it. Okay. And you have them, right? Your PowerPoints, you were able to see them. So I just can just make notes on from what you have. Just on the first transparency, we were able to see it. It's $166,000 that we collected under general fund in revenues and $92,000 in expenditures. For the electric fund, the month of April, we had $134,000 in revenues and $93,000 in expenditures. For the water fund, we had $62,000 in revenues, $17,000 in expenditures. For the sanitation fund, $43,000 and $21,000 for expenses. Under stormwater fund, we only have revenues. This is $9,800 in revenue, no expenditures yet. And for the Parks and Rec fund, we have $53,000 in revenues for the month of April and 28 for expenditures. And then on the second screen, you will see your year-to-date. So everything pretty much looks good. You know, revenues are higher than our expenditures as of right now, as of the month of April, except for the water fund and the sanitation. And because of the loans that we have early in the first quarter, you know, we have a couple of the loan payments, and we have the land purchase payment as well. So they split between water and sanitation. And then on the second slide, I had just the second revenue, so we're just comparing that first month in the second quarter. And so we have that 166,000 general fund, and then our budget for that second quarter is 547, and so on. So it's kind of looking a little higher just because we're just in the first month in the quarter.
Okay, I had a question about that.
Sure,
I think you just answered it.
Yeah.
The 547 figure, the blue line there, is really the annual budget split into quarters.
Yes,
So,
it's just the quarter of that budget number, yes.
all right, so really to compare the first month of the quarter, you basically multiply by 3 and compare. Okay,
Yes.
got it. Okay, I understand.
Yeah. And then so the next one, this is your expenditures compared to budget. And then again, this is kind of looks very small. This is the budget for that second quarter, but it's looking just because we're just at the beginning of the quarter for that school. And then here we come for the details. In general ledger for the second quarter, we had on the revenue side, 107,000 in taxes collected, 17,000 in fees, licenses, and permits. For the land lease revenue, it was a little high in this month just because we had 2 payments in March and April for the post office. But we normally have them on a monthly basis. We received 2 in April. And then 3,300 for the spirit hound. On the expenditure side, there was, other than payroll expenses, there was 5,000 for the Main Street beautification. And under streets, there were 5,000 for road base, patch, and repairs. On the electric fund, on the revenue side, we received 13,500 for investment fees, 18,000 for residential electric sales, 10,000 for non-taxable electric sales, and 27,000 for non-residential. On the expenditure side, besides payroll-related expenses, there was the payment of 77,000 for the electric power. And we go now for the water fund. On the water fund, we have revenues of 56,000 for meter water sales, and expenditures of 17,000, mainly payroll-related. On the sanitation, we have revenues of 40,000 for sanitation user fees, and expenditures were mainly payroll-related. Just a little bit of still paying the chemicals and all that for the testing, the water testing for the BOD, and 1,000 for the slush disposal. On the stormwater fund, it's mainly the stormwater drainage fees, which is the 9,810, and there's no expenditures there. For the Parks and Rec, revenues of 5,000, home addition fees, Parks and Recreation revenue of 23,000. I was very surprised to see just that number is like 46, so I think in the 40% just, in the first 4 months. So it's very nice on the county, with the county revenues of 21,000. The shelter, parking fees, dog park fees, and shower revenues combined, they were almost 3,000. And then on the expenditure side, there were very little, $1,000 for building maintenance and grounds, and $729 for trash collection and removal. Do you have any questions?
Are there any other questions?
I have a quick question on the stormwater fund.
Yes.
Are we on track to meet our budget for that, for the revenues that we're collecting?
I think so. because I think we under budget the number based on how many months we're gonna have out throughout the year. So it might be a little high at the end of the year when we, wrap up the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
So I just had a question for you on the financials, the PDFs that were in the packet.
Yeah.
On the general fund, the operating Bank of the West, that balance is negative for some of the funds, and it's quite large for the general fund. And then I see that our investment account is fairly low.
Yeah.
At what point would we start
When we
considering
do the
putting
transfers and all
some of
that,
that money that's in an operating
it
account?
might
over
still
to
be
the investment?
reflected because we haven't, our auditors are coming in June, so we haven't
That was my last question
finalized
for you. When
which
is the audit?
carries over into 2018.
I see, so some of the reserves then would be moved at
Yes,
that time?
yes.
And so the audit is scheduled for June?
Yes, the first week of June.
Do we expect it to take as long as it did last year?
I'm not sure, but we're just getting, we created a checklist, so we're just going over all the checklists to make sure, they don't spend as much time. I mean, that's the target, but, being my first time, going through this audit here, so I'm uncertain about that.
Okay, and then I just had another question about some of the grant funds. It looks like there's been some separation of the grants in how they're being accounted for and tracked. And I actually really like the way we're starting to see some more granularity in the reports, and I see there was one question I had. I wasn't sure why it was on that report, like where the, I guess the, sorry. Fund 22, for example, that's new. We haven't seen that in a report before, with comparison to budget. So it just looks like you might be starting to break out some things into some different accounts, which is fine. I think maybe at some point in a future meeting, it would be nice to kind of go through this report with us.
Okay.
And show us kind of, like there's a USDA loan, the principal.
Yes, like a separate fund, which is USDA loans.
I don't think we've seen this before. So that's where I'm just kind of maybe an overview of how things are being organized.
Okay.
I actually like it, looks like we're really starting to split out some of the different assets and liabilities in this accounting method. So, but it is different, so that would be great. And do a workshop at some point. All right. If there are no other questions, we can move on to the next item on the staff report, which is a one-part phase 2 update.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan and Board. My name is Richard Markovich. I'm the Flood Recovery Manager. So we're here to report on phone phase 2 and the progress we've made. We did have a phone conversation with FEMA, with Homeland Security, and sent them several reports to try to help them understand and provide information on potential paths forward. And fortunately, there's good news to report. They feel FEMA environmental and historic preservation has met with the state historic preservation officer, and they've found that they feel like they have a path forward that we can follow. So that's excellent news, and we're very encouraged by that. There's still quite a road to hoe, but we're on a path, and that's a great thing. So the next step is we're meeting with Homeland Security tomorrow to kind of gain further guidance on what the discussion with between EHB and the State Historic Preservation Office gain more information about what that discussion was and how we can assist and provide assistance to them. We have developed a request for quotes to hire a state historic preservation officer expert. That will be a representative, and they will work with FEMA and DHSEM in the town to chart the path forward and provide consultation for us. We're also looking at hiring an environmental assessment specialist consultant, and they would be looking at Bone Park Phase 2 at the environmental assessment requirements and what we need to supply there. And once again, the reason that we need an environmental assessment as well as a cultural and historical resource is because of the extent of the excavation was over 1 acre. And so they determined that we need to do an environmental assessment. Once we've hired this SHPO consultant and environmental consultant, and we move forward with both of those in concert with the ministry and try to expedite whatever needs to be done. Some of those, particularly we feel that the SHPO consultation will take probably somewhere around 3 months to complete, and we believe that the environmental assessment will take potentially 6 months or more. So we're looking at having the project back on track by the first of next year. And that's actually a tight timetable for what we're trying to achieve here. We're going to look for every opportunity to make that shorter. However, I don't want to lift expectations beyond what might happen.
Can you just clarify that the ball field portion is what the timeline you were just talking about? My understanding is the timeline for some of the other parts of the project might be able to continue, or leaving the whole project has to go together?
We'd like to look at completing some of the other portions of the work. However, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do that. We are planning a meeting with the contractor next week to try to plan a path forward with the contractor. We're trying to salvage the contract and make sure that we can continue with it. We're not 100% sure we can do that with the timetable we've got, but we met today in-house and discussed ideas on how to achieve that, and I think we have potential to do that. We need to consult with our attorneys and then with the contractor, and I believe we can do it. And my past experience from the past tells me that there's a way to do that. So I believe we can. That's pretty much where we're at right now. We don't have a solidified plan, an actual timetable, but once we meet with, get the consultants hired and get them on board and have them understand exactly what they need to do through SHPO and FEMA, we'll be able to chart and get a more defined schedule, and hopefully we can expedite that, like I was saying.
Any questions from the board? Trustee Darling?
Yes, I have a question. Are you familiar with the status of the skate plaza?
Yes, I have been copied on the emails that you can send me. We're once again this is a part of the project, and until we know where we're headed, we may need to leave the site undisturbed until the consultants can tell us that we can disturb it. If they the area of the skate park was in the flood zone, and so it was heavily scoured, and so there's potential to that might not be a consideration and might be an area that we could move forward with, but it's very complex, and how do we get the contractor to move forward on one piece and not the rest?
My concern is not so much the construction aspects of it, which I understand may need to be put on hold. It's the process for getting public input. On April 16th, we had a meeting. A number of people were here from the skateboarding community. They would promise that a meeting would be set up to get their views and input on the initial drawing that had been received from the designer. That didn't happen. The same representations were made to this board. This meeting would be set up, and it didn't happen. And the most recent email I saw suggested that it might be necessary to pay an outside contractor additional money to facilitate a meeting between town staff and the design consultant and citizens. I don't understand why public input on a public park that was redone after the initial larger skate park couldn't be done, and we established at the last meeting that there had been no public input on this reduced size skate plaza. Why we have to pay an outside contractor to hear from our own citizens? That baffles me.
Yes, Trustee Browning, I appreciate your comments and questions. I haven't been intimately involved in the skate park, however, I'll try to answer your questions. The skate park consultant was hired under the general contract,
Right.
and they are an out-of-state consultant. And so I believe that the reference to having to pay additional funds to have them come and participate in a public forum would be appropriate, because they're coming all the way from California for that specific purpose, and it's not necessarily in their scope of work.
I mean, do they expect to do a design and submit it to the town for a public park and not get any public input? I mean, they submitted their design and declared it themselves to be perfect when they submitted it, without getting any public input at all. I mean, was it a surprise to them that if they're going to submit a design for part of a public park, that they're going to need to get some public input at some point?
I don't believe so. As a relay, I haven't had too much involvement with this.
Yeah, I think I'll maybe defer the questioning. I think we need the Parks Director probably here for this discussion, so we can ask the Parks Director to be at the next meeting and ask them to
I'll be able
prepare
to be here for that.
for the, well, I think we can still have them come and give a report. There's other board members that I think are interested in kind of the individual projects that are going on with the Parks Plan. So it would be good to maybe continue with the combined approach of what can go forward, and if they can go forward in the near future without a long delay, what is the plan for getting the input that the board has asked for?
Thank
So
you,
that would
Lady
be,
Sullivan.
I think, a good next step. So if we can just make a note on the action items to make sure that the Parks Director is here for that.
I'm confident that we can have a constructive public input on the skate plaza, so I'd like to reassure the board and the mayor. Thank you for the input, and we'll report further on that.
Trustee Gore.
Is the current contractor still amenable to the process? Are they willing to delay their construction and still be the contractor? Are we okay there?
The contractor has been very supportive and cooperative. They of course want to know when we're going to proceed and whether they can proceed and when. Unfortunately, we don't have those answers just yet. And I believe that, they competitively bid this project. They did a good job. They came in low bid. We accepted them and hired them as a contractor, and that we should make every effort to save that contract, because it's a good contract and it was a good price. And they're a good contractor, and they've been very cooperative. So we're going to make every effort to do that.
That actually leads to my next question. Is the contract, if we stay with them, the contract amount would remain the same, or are the delays going to cause increases in that amount?
There will obviously be a cost of delay for this, because the contractor has pulled his equipment he has demobilized from the site. There will be a cost for that. There will be a cost for remobilizing. There also, if the project is in fact delayed 6 months, and the subcontractor bids that the contractor has solicited to submit his bid would have to be rebid by the contractor. I don't know if that, I don't know if I confused you with all that.
Yeah, I got it.
But he will have to go to each one of his subcontractors, his concrete sub, his whatever. He does some of the work in-house, but then has subcontractors. He'll have to go back to those subcontractors and bid the portions of the project that those subcontractors will provide. If he's able to bid that and keep it within a reasonable margin, I believe in the past, what my experience has been is that as long as you stay within the standard of the industry, adjustment for inflation and adjustment for the market value of construction, which then you, I believe we can substantiate that to FEMA. So the construction has been delayed because of this problem. It's not necessarily anyone's fault, however, we all have to deal with that. If we can salvage this contract, potentially we could convince FEMA to add this inflation clause or inflation costs, excuse me.
And then if for some reason the contractor did bow out, I'm assuming we'd have to go back out to RFP, go through that whole process?
If he were to rebid the project and it came in above this inflation factor that's standard of the industry, I don't know that we could continue with them. I think we would have to rebid the project.
Okay.
So there's a lot of unknowns. I'm trying to outlay ideas here rather than facts, and we'll know more as we continue. And of course, we need to consult with the attorney. We have not done that yet. So they may have a little different take.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I just want to commend staff on the exceptional job you guys have done staying on top of this, and also, we've had a lot of cooperation from the state. It's so nice to see some of them here in lines over the last week or two at different events, and so a lot of people are working on this issue. I think everyone realizes this is really significant for the town. It's a lot of dollars at risk. It's an important amenities that we've been waiting 5 years to get back. So I think there's been an appropriate level of urgency and priority placed to dealing with this issue. And I'm glad to hear that we're making some positive progress on it. So thank you for all the hours. I know it's been an all hands on deck situation for you. So
thank you very much. The team's been very supportive, and we're happy too. We feel like we've got a good chance here.
good. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to strategies for B&D reduction. Got all the staff here. I should have mentioned the town administrator is away dealing with the family matter, so she's on the phone, I think, for portions of tonight's meeting, but she is on now. Okay, so she's listening in case you're wondering where she is. But, so she can chime in. Feel free, Victoria, if you have something you want to add, just speak up and we'll let you get a mic over to you. Okay. All right, we'll turn it over to our town engineer.
Thank you. Well, just hot off the presses, I got on my email today. Our quarterly BOD average was 954 pounds this quarter. So we're, with our permit level at 704 and the state wanting us 20% below that, we're running really high. So what we've outlined is a plan to partner with businesses and see what we can do to get their cooperation and to follow the existing ordinance we have in place since I think it was 2008 to see if we can get our maintenance up and get all our grease traps cleaned out, checked, and maintained. Additionally, we're going to try to approach our two alcohol producing or growing businesses and see if we can get them to side stream all their waste. And hopefully that'll get us a good start at getting our numbers down. So I've outlined the plan there. Everything is in accordance with existing ordinances. Additionally, the UEB recommended that we buy a sampling machine like we had rented previously for the town, so that we can continue to do monitoring. Last time we used 4 and were able to go all over town, but we're thinking 1 now, spot collecting, would be ample to keep us up and see how we're doing on different things and our different issues. So that's what we're looking at for that. Any questions on that?
I just first want to disclose I have 2 businesses that will be impacted directly by this ordinance, but I do feel like I can participate tonight and be objective. I think the question I had for you, or at least I guess one of the things I was going to suggest is when an ordinance comes forward, and for the town attorney, I think we would like to see the option to pass it as an emergency ordinance. I think there's a sufficient urgency here for us to consider this as a health and welfare of the town issue. In the event we're exceeding our permit, and we're continuing to do so. And so I know how long ordinances can take to kind of bat around, but I think we'll workshop that ordinance first and then have it come forward with both options. So if the board doesn't choose to pass it as an emergency, we always have the option of they go about. But I think it would be good to have that option presented to the board. The other question I had was regarding, you also had installing cleanouts and laterals. Have you been able to talk to the businesses yet to get an estimate of what the investment would be for them?
No, we haven't, but I was sort of hoping the town could help with that a little bit and maybe even install them with our contractor.
Okay.
We're only looking at 2 cleanouts.
Okay. I think it would just be good to sit down. I know there were some initial meetings, but some feedback I got is that nothing definitive has been proposed.
No, and I don't want to scare anybody, but we're only looking at hooking up a 4-inch wide into a couple of laterals, so it's not a very big effort. Oh, just a little, I'm sorry, just a little piece of pipe so we can stick a sampler down there with a very minor procedure that our staff is even capable of doing.
Okay, I would just say if the business owners maybe reading the memo might be a little scared of what's to come around the corner. So I think just communicating quickly in the next week or so and as this process goes be helpful. Any other questions?
I have some questions. Well, I guess my first is a suggestion, but you mentioned in your memo that you're going to be conducting business visits by June 1 to check grease traps and compliance. I just wanted to suggest a follow-up visit in July and maybe then again in August, just to make sure that they're continuing to comply, instead of one time and then they're going to forget about it because you'll come back around. And then I had a question about decreasing the laterals. That would be the business owners, or I'm sorry, degreasing.
Oh.
Did I say decreasing? Yeah, degreasing the laterals. Would that be the business owner's responsibility?
We'd like to help them, but no, we've already got the chemicals in stock that would decrease the lateral. So we're just asking them to get the grease trap cleaned out, and then we've got the chemicals available that'll be nice to all our bacteria at the wastewater treatment plant, yet will degrease. So
is that just a matter of running those chemicals through the drain or through the grease trap, or you actually go into the line?
No, it's through the grease trap. I think it's the closest point we can get to where the lateral goes into the line.
Gotcha.
And we pour a gallon down, and then we come back and pour a quart in, and then we come back again and pour a quart in. It's fairly easy, but it should take care of a lot of the grease in their lines and solve their plumbing problems.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Any other questions? Trustee Carroll?
I'm just curious, you do mention something in here about recommending to the town outreach in general. Is that meaning residences?
Yeah, like we've had some crazy things. Last week, one of our residents had a sewer backup, and it was caused by someone flushing kitty litter down the sewer system. I mean, plugged up. So we'd just like to reach out to some of the residents and say, how about your neighbors and help us out on a few of these things.
Well, that kind of brought up in my next thought is that I was curious, and I think somebody else mentioned it to me, that raised the question, like home brewers and disposing, if that could be a potential, and just wondering if there could be a little bit of an educational something to go to residents to say, these are things we don't put down the drains, and it'd be best to find other ways to dispose of them. Call if you have if you need suggestions or something along those lines.
Okay, that's a good idea. We could add that. Yeah, we need to work with everyone and understand that we've got a sensitive ecosystem.
Right.
And their cooperation is always everyone's cooperation. I'm even afraid an artist is going to start using a different material and not realize what that could do. So we're going to continue the outreach of how sensitive our system is.
Yes, I can understand that. Thank you.
I have one other question. You talked about in the last meeting about the permit level, how we got there, do we even know if it's correct? We go through all these procedures and we find out it drops at 100. Where are we at then?
We're still not there. So we are going to
Where do we go from there?
We're working on another parallel system of getting a couple RFP outs for consultants to help us with our permitting of the plant and a little bit of analysis of it. So,
Does that permitting mean increasing actually our road permit?
yes. I have to say again, just so everyone knows, our affluent's turning out fabulous. I mean, you know, the plant's really operating well, even at these higher levels. It may be costing us a little more, but so I feel that we will be able to get that limit up, even based on the existing plant, or especially based on the existing plant.
We look forward to seeing.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, I think thank you for putting this together. I think this is
Okay.
exactly what we were kind of hoping to see. I think, you know, you can only fix so much through legislation. Sometimes you have to fix it through enforcement. And this is, you know, enforcing our existing code by kind of making sure businesses are on top of grease traps, and it's not fun to clean those things out. So we do need to make sure it's being done and doing what we can. I'm with Trustee Caravis. The levels are extraordinarily high and unusual if you talk to experts to see these kinds of levels. So I'm curious to see what kind of impact this has. And that was my follow-up question is, I guess, at what point would you start to expect to see some impact if people are compliant with these things? Do you have any sense for?
We should notice within a couple of weeks. We're monitoring every week at the wastewater treatment plant, so we should start to see those numbers drop, hopefully really quickly. So we're keeping our monitoring up.
We'll hope so. Madam President?
Is there a seasonality to the measurements? In other words, are they higher in summer?
Yes.
And so we're going into the higher season. And so we may actually be making progress and the levels remain close to the same, right?
That's possible, yeah. But like last July, as an example, the test was taken on July 5th, and it was the only test taken, so I'm hoping that was a real outlier. But yeah, I do expect the numbers to get higher, and hopefully we'll even get them lower in spite of an increase in demand.
I think, just to underscore what's already been said, I think we need to be aggressive with action. I mean, there's a lot of legislation and, revising codes and all that kind of thing, but this, and you have outlined here some strong actions to take, and we just underscore the importance of those actions. And the reason I'm saying that again and again is just to add a little fuel, if you will, to your conversations with businesses, that the Board of Trustees is very, very concerned about this because of its impact on the town and these businesses themselves. And so we really have to take action.
I find them to be good citizens, and I do expect cooperation, so I'll let you know if someone doesn't, but I really...
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, just one little other update, so you know, they're going to start working on the recycling center, moving it to the wastewater treatment plant on Wednesday.
Oh, that's very exciting.
So the county's starting that process, so hopefully within a month, we'll have all that moved over
Great.
and out of the way of the library.
Great.
So I just thought I'd update you on that.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next item is an update on the downtown revolving loan. Musical chairs.
Hi. So in your package, you have a cover sheet that talks about the revolving loan fund. We were approached by the USDA that they have some funds available, and it sounds like they'd really like Lions to apply for this $25,000 grant.
Currently, their first USDA grant was about $53,000 that was loaned out. They were really favorable terms. I think the first 2 years was interest-free, and then 10 years to pay back the loan. We're starting to get paybacks, and right now the fund has about $10,000 that's been paid back. So if we apply for this $25,000, we'd have $35,000 to loan out. Perhaps if businesses need help enhancing their grease traps, that would be something. We also have $37,500 in the Business Recovery Fund, and that is not federally funded. That is from the local donations, and that Mayor O'Brien, I think, was a big part of in terms of, and a lot of that came in after flood donations, is my understanding. So we just want to make sure that you're okay with us applying for the grant for the $25,000 from USDA.
And I see a lot of head nods.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I was involved in getting those set up.
Trustee Watt,
Oh, sorry,
had a question.
sorry.
You might not have these numbers yet, but of the outstanding loans, do you know what the monthly recovery amount is that goes back into the fund?
I do. I've seen it. Do you remember it? I want to say we get close to about $600 a month.
Okay.
Would be paid. And that's both funds, Julie.
Okay. And are there any delinquencies on any of the loans, or are they being paid back?
Not as far as I know. Ariane Powell manages that, and she does send a letter every so often if somebody is a little bit late. And my understanding is generally if a business is late, it's usually due to the seasonality of the business. You know, January can be a much slower time, but then they seem to catch up. And then we actually have one business I know of that pays extra every month and wants to pay it off early.
Okay. And I would just say I highly support taking any additional money that we can to put in that fund. When I was the owner of the dairy bar, we did use that fund to borrow money to build out our indoor dining area. So it was really helpful for our business for the winter season.
Right, and then we'll get to establish the terms again. So, and there's no match.
Trustee Berman?
I understand there's $37,500 in the Business Recovery Fund that's available to loan.
That's my understanding.
So potentially we're looking at a total of almost $70,000 that would be available. I think your suggestion was a very good one, that if, looking down the road, we get to a place where certain businesses need to do pre-treatment and install additional equipment, or one grease trap is a problem and they need to replace it, those loans aren't really, as I recall, restricted too much on purpose, so that we could potentially provide a source of no interest for a period and then low interest for a long payback period to help local businesses with that.
Anybody else? My only other comment was putting some good structure around how the loans are managed, the committee who approves them. Something kind of grew out of the flood and got done. Great, people dove in and took care of it, but probably at this point we need a little more formal process and who's on that group, how were they evaluating people and following up. So you guys have done a great job kind of managing it. It seems like it's probably not well known that this is an option, because things have kind of died down since it started. So it'd be great to see this kind of, be communicated to the businesses and explain what the process is, also what the criteria are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want it used in a certain way, people understand the goal.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. All right, thank you. I appreciate the updates. All right, the next item on the agenda is audience business. This is the portion of the meeting where anyone here not for a public hearing tonight is welcome to approach the board on items of interest. We do have one public hearing for Resolution 2018-45, which is an alteration to the minor event restrictions in the keynotes for Plant Bluegrass Farm. So if you're here for that item, you can wait to speak until we get there. Otherwise, if you have any other items you'd like to discuss with the board, you're welcome to come forward. Each person will have 4 minutes. Give your name and address for the record.
Seeing no takers, we will move on to board and commissions updates. We have Steve Sims, the chair of the Ecology Advisory Board, with us to give us a up to 15-minute update on the Ecology Board is up to. Thank you for being here with us.
It's working. Okay, sounds good. Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. Nice to be here with you tonight, just to give you a bit of an update and actually ask for your input on 4 items. I believe you received in a packet the information pertaining to those 4 items. For the audience, I'll just go over them real quick, I guess. Basically, one is in regards to creating a subcommittee under the Ecology Advisory Board for pesticide, herbicide, insecticide usages. The second one is working with Boulder County's GIS data set and to incorporate that into the Town of Lyons GIS data site for ecological information and what's the term I'm looking for, biodiversity areas in our community. The third item is just a change of board members, and then the fourth item related to the Watershed Advisory Board coming under the Ecology Board now that they have done a lot of their river work as their own board. So, let's go back to the first item, and maybe for ease of time, just assume everybody read all that and then just kind of dive in and ask questions or do a Q&A. Does that seem like the best way, or should I summarize anything at all related to the creation of a subcommittee for weed mitigation and pesticide herbicide usage?
You may ask the board members when they have specific questions. Trustee Brennan?
That subcommittee includes someone from Parks and Rec, because they've obviously dealt with this for years. Getting their input up front would probably be helpful.
That's a good suggestion. The notion of creating a subcommittee is kind of the first item, putting it forward to you, and then to see if we have people interested in stepping up to be part of that subcommittee. So right now we don't have members or any citizens that are showing an interest in that, but it's not heavily pushed or advertised. Or I announced it first at the Ecology Outreach meeting where we did the OWL presentation with Boulder County. So that's kind of the beginning of the process. Is it okay to create a subcommittee? And then, like you said, that's a great suggestion to bring in Park and Rec individual Dave, if Dave Cosgrove suggests somebody.
Trustee Miller?
I read that there are several people that are interested in doing volunteer work for that project.
Great.
If they were to want to actually step up and start leading in the subcommittee, how should they contact?
They should contact me, and then we'll invite them to one of our Ecology Board meetings.
Okay.
And we'll put it on the agenda, and then start to design the structure around what that subcommittee would look like. And we've got a pretty good list of things that we're interested in. Just the legwork of getting it done would be great to have folks who are interested and maybe educated in some of those aspects from other municipalities and so forth, bringing in knowledge from other municipalities.
Trustee Miller?
Yeah, I have a comment on that. I definitely support a subcommittee to look at it. It's been an issue in town for several years, and I don't think we've quite gotten there with the community. But I would like to see just thought put into weed mitigation downtown Main Street area or downtown business corridor versus weed mitigation in our parks, because I think you can look at them differently. And I'm coming from the standpoint of, I have business owners who I know are really upset because there's still a lot of weeds around the downtown corridor, and what is the town going to do about that?
Yeah.
And then I've recently probably spoken to the same citizens that Wendy has about, they have health issues and they can't be in the parks because of an immune deficiency or something because of the chemicals that are used. So, I think we have very different issues on, those two sides, so I'd just like to see the committee look at that.
As I hear you, there's multiple concerns in multiple areas that will have to be addressed. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I honestly hadn't put a lot of thought into breaking it up into individual areas within the town. But you said Main Street definitely is a sore thumb with the rock and then the ground fabric and then all the weeds coming up in there. So there was a pretty concerted effort in the early days of not doing fabric and rock and kind of from a landscape perspective. And we wanted more like junipers and ground covers, vegetated ground covers that would help inhibit weed growth. And I think I'm thinking back a little bit, but I think there was a budgetary component, and I think some of the items and suggestions get diluted when we comment on town plans, and 90% plans and so forth, and then goes back and forth between designers and input from the community, and then things do get lost. It's kind of hard to keep your thumb on all that. So I think some of the vegetation got reduced on the eastern corridor, not the eastern corridor, but by Julie's Tie and that area, some of the vegetation didn't quite get planted the way we had envisioned it. So
I think I'm hearing support for trying to look at the town's current policy and make recommendations for whether or not, for weed control in general. I guess my only additional comment would be that whatever we propose, we have to have some idea of what it costs and how it compares to what we're currently spending. I mean, we can say all day long we don't want any chemicals used, but if we have no other way to get the weeds under control, except for hiring lots and lots and lots of people because the volunteers sometimes, we have a lot of things to maintain. And so what's a reasonable way to maintain it? I think that the approach to Main Street and some of these small areas that are hard to grow something on and are currently very hard to manage from a weed standpoint. Being a business owner of one corner, that I can just tell you, it is just impossible unless you're willing to pay out of pocket. What's the, do we want continuity in how the business district looks? So you can have everyone just go out there and do their own thing, but what's the end result of that going to be? And some are going to do it better than others, and we may not like what they do.
Yeah.
So I do think you have to look at the cost factor, and I do think that it would be in some cases more cost effective to invest in some ground covers and do a one-time upgrade than it is to continue to try to manage weeds and spray and upset the public. So I think if you want to, really, I think to make progress here, at some point we got to get into the financials. And I don't think you can do that without having parks at the table, because it's, a lot of their budget and public works as well, who have the responsibility for maintaining the town. Because on one hand, they hear us yelling at them that there's weeds are out of control, and on the other hand, the public's yelling that they don't want to see any spraying.
yeah. Yep.
So there's a balance there, and we have to figure out what that is. So I'm all for trying to figure out how can we reduce the spraying, but there has to be an alternative other than we're going to rely on volunteers to go out and pull weeds, because we know realistically that's not going to keep things under control. And we are spending money on this now. What are we spending?
Mm-hmm.
And what, are we just kind of, we're not getting anywhere. We still have.
Can it be better spent?
Could we be spending the money more wisely and get an improved product? So
Okay.
I would love to hear your thoughts on that, but I agree with Trustee Browning and others to say it can't be an ecology board only. I think it has to be a cross-section of different departments.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and move on to your next item?
Okay, that sounds good. The second one is that one of our board members, Jerry, is a professor at the university, and he was able to get an intern to work with some of the GIS data from Boulder County. And that data set, some of that data set's kind of proprietary because of species, nesting species, certain kinds of plants, and so I think with Joe's assistance, we were able to get that intern to have access to Boulder County proprietary GIS data, looking for some uniqueness in the vegetation that's around the town of Lyons. And that data set we would like to incorporate into the town of Lyons' newer GIS data set. So I come to you tonight to ask if that's okay. How we go about doing that, what the data set is exactly, we still need to review it, to be honest with you. And if this intern can't do it because of this semester is up, we'll try to find another intern to do that incorporation. But Boulder County's data sets are fabulous, and they've done all types of layering to them. So I think it would be helpful looking at our community going forward. I know it's like the Highway Corridor 36 is, you know, the year 2040, what that's supposed to look like and what kind of things we should be looking at now to help with wildlife corridor to work with human corridors. And so I ask you tonight permission to go forward with starting to expose some of this data, bring some of this data into our Town of Lyons GIS set.
Let's go with
Trustee
just
Wong?
a question. So on the map, you can basically, you know, turn on and off layers. Would it be one of those layers on the map?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I guess the question I have is, and one, I think we need to hear from staff on what's required on their part. Two, I'm not sure I know how sensitive the data, you mentioned some of the data is proprietary. If there's any permissions that are needed from the county to do this, if we look into that.
Yeah, we've worked with two of the ecologists from Boulder County, and they do have official forms that have to be signed in order to grant that exchange of data. And then the town will have to determine whether or not that data should be held private or shared, exposed on the Town of Lyons GIS map website. Honestly, I don't think we want to get into the realm of having to keep some data confidential and some data not. I think we should just bring in the data that talks about some of these really unique wildlife habitat corridor perimeters. In one of the maps that I sent out to you, there's two green spots. I'll just spin this around real quick. If you saw this map, and they show these two wildlife corridors, and that is the Lucaden property going across over by Gwen's greenhouse. And that's an incredibly unique habitat corridor. And so preservation of that should be one of our top priorities. That's not confidential. So bringing that type of data as the Eastern Corridor expands. There's a special term they gave for that, outstanding biodiversity and irreplaceable. There's only two out of probably 50 or 60 parcels in all of Boulder County. There's only two parcels that meet that criteria, and they are right around Lyons, which is quite unique. That's just due to the diversity of species and the wildlife migration through those areas.
I guess if the board is interested, I think the next step would actually be to get some input from staff, to understand the staff responsibilities and what work is involved.
Is Joe still around? Is he?
I think we can
say he seems like the one we're working with the most.
Okay.
So.
All right. And next thing.
Okay, then David Batts was on our board. Then he, in the formation of the watershed board, David moved into that direction. We had a few other members come on to the ecology board. Now that the watershed board is sunsetting, we're asking David to come back and kind of wear the hat of the chair of a subcommittee, watershed related or riparian core river related. So that's the request there. That was the email I sent you earlier today. So
And I think he's the one remaining, well, we have a couple members of the Watershed Advisory Board that have not, officially resigned or anything because the board is merging. So I think the understanding was they would all have the option to continue on with the Ecology Board. Since they were already appointed, if there's no objection from the board, we would allow anyone who wants to continue to serve to go ahead and be a member of the Ecology Board.
Watershed Subcommittee.
And they can be a subcommittee, or you guys can sort out how you want to assign responsibilities.
We would welcome them.
He was a member before, so he's willing, and he's a phenomenal expert. I think I would be excited to see that you want to continue, so you can consider the appointment made.
I will work on that.
All right, thank you.
So I guess, do I have your approval to, is that approved? Yeah, I think you have to make an official announcement.
It's kind of unique because he's already a board member and the board's emerging.
I see.
And so I don't think he needs to go through the application process. I think we just merged the two boards. And
he did, and we submitted it to you, but that's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
For the official side of it. Okay. And then my last question, look at my own notes. We answered that in a sense, because there was some dialogue about, is the watershed committee going to remain in force, or is it going to be dissolved or sunset? And I never really got straight, 100% clear, but I've kind of been trying to read the...
Well, I think that we wanted to hear from the two board chairs, and I've heard from both board chairs that the preference is to go ahead and merge the two boards and bring watershed underneath ecology. We are going to be doing a revision of the board and commission ordinance, and we either needed to establish the watershed as an official board or just put those responsibilities under the Ecology Advisory Board. And I got the sense from just the lack of activity going on in the watershed now with flood recovery and restoration mostly done, and just waning interest of board members as well, that it would be best to merge the two. So that was the direction we took with the draft.
Okay.
Revisions to the ordinance, and we haven't seen it'll be coming to the board soon.
Great.
So that is the direction, so
Okay.
you can proceed with that understanding.
Okay.
And I guess, the one thing we do need to make sure is still being done is there should still be hopefully someone willing to liaise to the St. Vrain Creek Coalition, as long as it's still active, to make sure we know what projects they might be taking on. And I know we have some staff liaisons as well, so maybe that's something we could take back to the group. And
I'm glad you
might be
said
some new interest as well from the existing board members. So if you're interested, great to be part of.
Okay, yeah. I'm glad you suggested that, the liaison to, was that it's Left-Hand Water District, or?
Well, it's a whole separate coalition for the St. Vrain Creek. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Erica was a part of it. Okay.
Right.
So I guess this makes it official, this meeting is that's good, okay.
yeah, my understanding is they haven't been meeting, so it's all yours.
Okay.
All right.
We started out with it in a sense, and that's really when the Ecology Board gained a tremendous amount of traction, and a woman in town named Caitlin, who's a restoration ecologist from Harvard, came up with the Sustainable River Corridor Action Plan, and she had been working in Chicago under Mayor Daley and brought a lot of concepts, and then the rest of the board just added all these concepts and ideas to that, and that really helped, I think, vet a lot of our contractors coming into our community with a like-mindedness for some natural restoration on the river instead of just hardscape. So we hope that the upland version of that will also gain traction as things are happening in our community. So we'll have a river corridor action plan and then an upland habitat action plan. So I'm working with that.
All right. Well, that river corridor action plan has been an invaluable document post-flood. So it's a great piece of work that your group has done, and nice job with the recent OWL program.
Cool.
So pass on our thanks to all your board members for their hard work.
Okay, I'll pass that on to everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for resolution 2018-45. Assuming there'll be some staff introduction. you guys just to wait until we get to the public hearing? I'll let you just be first in the public hearing if that's all right. Right, I'll turn it over to staff. Thank you.
Sure. So I put in the packet that in late April, we learned from Planet Bluegrass that they had forgotten to include lineup as part of their annexation agreement last year. And so we internally discussed, what were some options in terms of property that they possibly could use in town. We talked about the wastewater treatment plant, the school, a couple of different options. And then reached out to Marcus and said, what are our options here? Because I think from a staff perspective, we understand the health and safety component to come up with a solution. And so Marcus kind of found a way that we might be able to do this, I think, and he can explain a little bit more about it with the 60-day and the 90-day and kind of the time frames we're up against. So.
Sure, I'll just point out that the annexation and development agreement for the farm property, and this is the language that is on page 1 of Resolution 2018-45 in your packet. Minor event is defined in subsection C5 of the keynotes, and it does allow, you'll notice the last paragraph says that upon application by the owner made not less than 90 days prior to the date of commencement of a minor event, the Board of Trustees may modify or alter the restrictions provided in this section 5, where the board finds that there will be no detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and that such modification or alteration is generally consistent with the conceptual plan. You'll notice that in the definition of minor event, it does say that there can be no more than 12 held in any one calendar year, fewer than 250 persons in attendance. Importantly, there shall be no overnight camping at any minor event, and no minor event shall be held on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. The intent being that minor events would be held only on Friday and Saturday. And for those of you that were on the board at the time, you may remember that discussion. The applicant is requesting that 2 minor events, and 2 minor events only, be approved for the 2018 calendar year. It's the 2 lineup events that Kim just mentioned. Unfortunately, those are to be held on Sundays, so it directly conflicts with the provision of the definition of a minor event in the agreement. However, it does state that the Board of Trustees can modify or alter the restrictions provided upon a written application by the owner. Now, the application was not technically made within that 90-day advance time frame. It has for the second event that's proposed, the event that will be held in August, I believe, but not for the first one. But I do think that, as Kim pointed out, there is a parking issue in town this calendar year due to Bone Park being under construction. And I think if you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer those, or we may want to hear from the applicant. But I do believe that you have the authority to alter this restriction, and then, as is pointed out in the DOT agenda cover memo and in the resolution itself, the next step in this process, if this is supported by the Board of Trustees, would be to amend the amendable letter of understanding that was approved together with the annexation agreement. And that is allowed clearly in the keynotes, and you can do that as you would approve any other contract. So I think the process would be to bring that amendment back at the next meeting in June and have that presented to you and approved. If it's even something that the board wants to entertain. But we thought this is I think, important request for managing traffic associated with this event, and we wanted the opportunity to at least get this in front of the board and have the applicant come and present the ideas for these 2 potential minor events for this calendar year.
Other questions for staff? There's another question. So the health and safety aspect, so the lineup prior years occurred in Bone Park, and the alternative for this year, if this was not approved, would be to line up in the same general area. So what's the health and safety aspect?
I think from staff perspective is there's generally a sheriff escort. In the past at Bone Park, and certainly I think Brian and Craig can speak to it, is there was some camping at Bone Park before lineup, but they have said that with it at the farm there wouldn't be any camping. And so we were just trying to come up with a way between staff and the planet of how to best do this so that cars can safely line up, get onto the property for this. There's generally 4 lineups that they do. They're covered on the Thursday. It's this Sunday for these 2 schools. So we felt like we discussed many options of where could you park and do a lineup that would have enough room and then get escorted properly. So that's kind of where we ended up with feeling like it was, we didn't want people all over town parking in every place, waiting, which I think probably used to happen and could happen if we don't have a plan.
And probably the applicant, but so the plan would be up for up to 250 cars. Does that typically meet the capacity of the lineup? Because that's the number in the amended plan?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we'd have to speak to them about the numbers.
Okay, we can look that one. Trustee Walker, go ahead.
So you said that it's covered for the Thursdays. What do you mean by that?
And again, this is, I think Planet can explain it probably better than me or even Marcus, but with their major event permit for the festivals, it goes, the event is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but the agreement is at 24 hours beforehand, so they have, Thursday is not an issue. So at first we thought it was going to be 4 dates, and then as we looked into the agreement, it's really the challenge is on this Sunday for the lineup.
Where will the lineup occur on the Thursdays?
It can occur on their property per the current.
Okay, for the contract for the festivals. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing for Resolution 2018-45, and if anyone would like to come forward and speak, you're welcome to do so. We'll give each, we'll let the applicant come up first, and then we'll open it up to anyone else who'd like to speak.
I'll go. Well, first of all, really sorry that we're wasting everybody's time on something I should have noticed a year ago and 2 months ago. I don't really think there's much to add as far as the solution we've come up with. We know from history that if we don't provide a place for these people lined up, they'll be all over town. And we would like to not have come here, but I think it's in the best interest of the town that we use the fund for this purpose. Regarding the number of cars, that students, there's less than 200, there's 250 students or less for the song school, and Rock Dress about the same, so 250 cars ought to cover it. If there's any questions, I know Brian and Kim have worked a lot more on this for you, and thank you, Marcus, for your extra work, and you expect, because this should have been part of what the original analysis, we expect to receive a bill from Marcus's time for having to do this. Don't have anything to add other than to answer questions.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward? I'd like to ask a question. Okay, Trustee Brown, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I was a little confused. So if cars, that 250 cars are going to park on your property, the farm property, what is the transportation of those people getting onto the Bluegrass property?
They are, historically, they've been chaperoned by the Boulder's finest.
Okay. But that was prior to people being in town, getting on a shuttle bus and coming.
No, I mean, the police escort them.
So, okay, then my question is, from your property, is it pedestrian escort, or are you going to have cars come down?
Cars will come down. All these cars intend to camp at Planet Bluegrass during the length of the school.
So I guess it's the 250 cars coming from your property, farm property, down into...
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about a long delay in traffic, if I'm trying to visualize this correctly, 250 cars versus can you get a bunch of people on a bus and then there's not this massive delay of traffic because we'll be backed up forever.
Well, I think it's the same 250 cars have been up on Park that have had to go through more intersections than this will. And the people want their car there.
Okay, I guess I had thought it was always a pedestrian thing, so I was confused.
Well, no, but I think your point, the thought I had is it's a left turn instead of a right turn.
Correct.
So
Well, we are
it's gonna
expecting to have
back up
to
traffic on both sides of the highway.
take the sheriff's advice. I believe they're going to come through town and then go around and not try to stop traffic at Plant Bluegrass there. We leave that up to them, but that's the initial thought. Is that they'll come down up Broadway and go around. And they do it in waves, at 25 cars at a time.
Oh, okay,
And they're pretty good at it.
okay. That helps me to visualize that better.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak on resolution 2018-45? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing now. Open it up for board discussion. Trustee Monk?
Just for full disclosure, I was on the board when this annexation took place, but I recused myself because I am an employee of Plant Bluegrass. I do think that I can be fair and impartial, so therefore I am going to stay and vote.
Thank you. Other, Trustee Farrell?
So initially, I mean, I was not a part of your discussions for when this was established, but my initial thought is it being a Sunday twice this year, we're talking about 2018 only, I don't really have a problem with that, but I am very concerned about the traffic issue. I really didn't realize that it was a matter of that many cars transporting from such a close location, and I like hearing that it's in waves of 25 cars at a time. But, you know, we all know what the traffic is like on that particular weekend, and I just really am concerned about that flow. I would want reassurance that it's not going to be as awful as I envision.
Other questions? Trustee Brown?
Just that comment, really. One of the benefits outlined when the annexation was proposed was that it would move the parking of cars and the flow of traffic through residential neighborhoods, which is where it used to go from Bone Park out to the plant. This is much closer geographically, and even if it circles to the downtown business district temporarily, I think this is in keeping with what was proposed at the time of the annexation, that we won't have the traffic flow down 2nd Avenue through the residences. And I think it's actually a more efficient process than we had before, and I'm in favor of it.
Any other comments? Trustee Moore?
I just forgot.
I can tell when you're
Yeah, I know you so well. I would also just express my support for it, and it happens every year that 250 cars have to get from here to there, so I agree with Trustee Browning that I think this is a more efficient way. I also remember during the annexation and zoning hearings specifically asking about that clause in the keynotes, and I was asking if the board could be more restrictive as well as more flexible with that clause. So that just really sticks in my head that, you know, I agree with legal counsel that we really have the ability to make this decision based on that paragraph in the keynote. So I just feel very comfortable with allowing this to happen under the circumstances that we're facing in 2018.
My comment is that I don't have a problem really with the number of cars, even though it probably will restrict me getting out of where I live a little bit. So I don't really have a problem with that, and I do think that the board does have the authority. I'm trying to think through the effect of this more broadly in terms of conditions related to annexations and the the amount of flexibility that's accorded. So in other words, does this create any kind of precedent or, influence on future decisions relative to conditions associated with annexations?
No, I don't believe it does. And in fact, I think why we're viewing this as really a two-step process tonight was to get your initial thoughts as to whether you would support the request to have these two minor events on these two discrete Sundays. Is that then the next step in the process will be to amend the document that's called the amendable letter of understanding, which is something unique to this zone district. And what we will set forth in that amendable letter is all of the conditions really that you see in section 2 of the resolution. So we have language that states that the owner of the town shall amend the amendable letter, obligating the owner to coordinate with CDOT and the sheriff's office, include the installation of temporary signage, traffic control, minimum of 4 Boulder County Sheriff's Office deputies to direct traffic and whatnot. And I think in that amendable letter, we can clarify this is for 2018 only, and the parties both agree that this won't set any precedent whatsoever for future years, that the language in the keynotes restricting the dates of the minor events will remain as written. Now, that being said, I think that because the applicant has said, whoops, I missed this, he might at some point come back with a request that we modify the language in the agreement itself to be more permanent in nature. But I think that would be, if we start changing what was the intent of the overall conceptual plan when the property was brought into the town, that's something that I think merits something more akin to the full rezoning process, where we would want it to go to the PCDC for input. We'd want there to be 2 public hearings, because that's really what they're tasked with, right? PCDC should look at something like that, make a recommendation, bring it back to you all. But the applicant, I think, wants to get through this first season to see how the farm functions as an integrated property with the festival property, and there may be some tweaks ultimately to this agreement, but that's something that we run through a full process, and this does not set any precedent for future years.
Yeah, and my question is not related to any of the business requirements associated with the request. That's not the issue. It's more just technically, and it's not so much precedence for planting bluegrass and what planting bluegrass might do it subsequently. It's in terms of annexations in general, are we sort of setting up this perspective that there's a lot of flexibility associated with conditions that are associated with annexations?
I don't think you're setting any precedent there. I mean, this is a very unique zone district and was actually written into the town's zoning code specifically for the bluegrass property. And I don't think the zone district will be applied to any other property in the town. So I don't think you're setting any precedent in terms of any other future annexations in other parts of the town, if that helps answer your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to take a little bit different opinion because I think we are making an exception to the 90-day rule of notification. We're waiving it. And I think we are allowing a minor event, if that's what we're calling it, on Sunday, which was in conflict with the keynotes. So, I mean, I think we're saying, look, okay, there's something here that doesn't work in what we passed. So, I mean, it may not legally, but I think politically, we have to be very careful about basically passing an annexation agreement and then saying, well, we're going to ignore that, and we're going to ignore that, and we're going to go ahead and override it this time. And I get it that there's some special circumstances and these things do need to be adjusted from time to time, but I think we have to be cautious about how to go about that, because the next annexation agreement is going to come forward, and it's going to come back to bite us, and people are going to say, well, it doesn't matter what you agree to, because you're just going to waive it anyway after the fact. So I do think that the board has to be careful about how flexibly we want to look at these agreements that went through a really vigorous public process and what we agreed to. And the reason these were restricted to certain days is because of the input we got from the public. So I'm also just kind of wondering, is this our last resort? I mean, we got 250 cars, we couldn't line them up through the school, through the church, through the Bone Park new parking area, and through the public works site. I mean, it would essentially be status quo to how we've done things in the past versus, literally reopening keynotes and amendable letters of agreement for an annexation that's brand new and coming out of the gate. with what's the public's perception of this going to be working out for the first year. So how many people are paying attention, who knows, in terms of keeping track of what's supposed to be going on Sunday and what's a minor event and whether the process was followed. I think maybe not this time, but if it doesn't go well, it could come back again next time. So I just think that's stuff we have to weigh. And I also think that as the applicant shows good faith in complying with the annexation agreement, it doesn't violate any of the rules in the annexation agreement. That also goes a long way to show good faith to the citizens who trusted that we would follow these rules. So I think those are all things that we have to take into consideration, that this is new and a new property and a new use for it. And it's going to feel very different to the citizens. And after the fact, that may be when the questions come. So it may be just for this year presented this way, but I guess my question is, this is still something that I don't know if it's going to be this easy. We may want to allow for it this time, but I'm not sure I see it as a just this year event. This is kind of a new way of doing it. I think that'll end up being the request we'll do, let's just do it this way going forward, and maybe that's fine. But it is not what we passed as an annexation agreement in keynotes through that public process. So I just have to say that's kind of where I'm at with it. We certainly are supportive of Point Bluegrass and what they do for the town, but this is what we agreed to.
So would that suggest that we have some process associated with any amendment of the amendable letter, so that people have an understanding? I mean, the discussion we're having now is so that we do the right things the right way for this and for any other activity that we're engaged in. That's all. But and one of the things we've learned is that if we're not very transparent, I mean very transparent, as to what we do, we get a lot of pushback, and it erodes trust. And when you're eroding trust, what happens is it erodes trust not just on these things, but on everything from ADUs and alleys to people's willingness to cooperate with code enforcement. And I don't want to go too far with that. I'm just trying to emphasize that there's a little more to it than which is a strong case for doing this, but there's a little more to it than this case itself.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Is there one who would like to offer a motion?
I would move that we approve Resolution 2018-45, which is a resolution memorializing the modification or alteration of the minor event restrictions set forth in Section C5 of the keynotes to conceptual plan for Planet Bluegrass Farm annexation for 2018 minor events only.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Right, I'm going to vote no on this. I feel like there was not really another alternative presented to the board in terms of why it couldn't be done otherwise. There was only really one option presented. I think it sets I do think it sets a precedent that we're going to be flexible after we approve things. I think that there probably was maybe another alternative in this case. Call for the vote. Right, it does pass 5-2. So the resolution passes, and the next step will be to bring the amendable letter to the board at the next meeting. Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion, or I'm sorry, will the clerk please read the items on consent into the record?
We have a resolution 2018-44, a resolution accepting contract amendment 1 to F16S8115, an energy and mineral impact assistance fund grant for Lions Human Resource Staffing Assistance. The May 2018 accounts payable and the May 7th Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
All right, would anyone like to pull any items from consent?
I'd like to pull item number 1.
All right, is there a motion to approve the remaining 2 items on the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we are now call for vote. All right, Passes 7-0. On to general business. Is the town administrator on the phone?
Are you there, Victoria?
I'm here. Okay. Are you still going to give a housing update?
Sure, I can give a housing update if you can hear me.
Maybe get a mic over to the speaker. Yeah.
You ready?
I think so. It's not very loud, so I don't know if you can work on the volume.
I tried to send it in order to Paul and Jeff, but I didn't get a response that they received it, so.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Can you just put the microphone by this, Jeff?
Yep, it is.
Okay. I have a few items for a housing update. First of all, in regard to Summit Housing, we did host their, hold on.
You're good?
Oh, okay. They did host their public input meeting, and they are currently reviewing those comments and determining and preparing for a path forward. They have expressed to me that they would like to follow their response to their RFP and try to offer as many units as possible. So they are considering the current site, as well as they did express a willingness to consider 2 sites if there was another site available and it worked out to be financially feasible. And so upon my return, I do want to reopen discussions with Mr. Van Court on North St. Vrain Road to see if his site is still another option. And then lastly, Thistle also presented housing options as part of, in conjunction with the Greens project out in Lions Village East. And it's my understanding you're going to be discussing that issue or item next. So those are my updates.
All right, any questions for Victoria? Trustee Farrell?
I'm sorry, I could not hear very well. So if somebody could help me hear that last part of it a bit better, about Summit?
Or Thistle? Yeah, you mean the very last part?
No, I'm sorry, the first part of it.
Oh, the first part. I'm sorry.
So, the part about Summit, I couldn't hear that.
Okay, Summit has expressed an interest to continue to offer as many units as possible per their RFP response, which was up to 43 units on the Lions Valley Park site. So they do want to continue to pursue that if possible, but they would not rule out considering fewer units if they could locate a second site to do that on.
I understand. That's what I missed. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Paul for an update on the Greens proposal.
So, if you guys want to, is it okay to invite them up?
I think this is board discussion, so I think we're here to give some
So
insight based on the last presentation.
They submitted some new information, which is in your packet, and they submitted a pro forma for the south side, a design for that, and a letter from Scott at S2O about how they would proceed with the restoration there. And they did a little bit more work on that south side design and did a phasing plan where they develop in the front a few more buildings. They decided that they were willing to go ahead without a financial commitment from the town for affordable housing. So it is our, we're hoping to hear how you would like to proceed with the purchase contract, if you would.
So I think what we wanted to do tonight was, this is a new group, and so we haven't heard from everyone on the board. The old board heard the first proposal, and a lot's changed since the first proposal was brought forward. So I thought it really as a starting point, we needed to just gauge interest from the board now. I mean, based on everything that's happened in the last, I guess it was January, February or somewhere in that range when we first kind of started to talk about this, but also some other considerations such as the proposal to move the public works site. We have some, need to understand whether we can get the permitting we need for the water treatment plant for this type of development and timelines. Realistically, what is the timeline? Regarding the affordable housing, that's a different response than we got last meeting around how the two were connected. So, so there's a lot of kind of moving information on this project. So I thought we'd just take a step back and let the board kind of say, okay, we heard the presentation. Where are we? What are the thoughts of the board now compared, has it changed as we've learned more? Are we still interested? What's the sentiment? So I thought we would just kind of have an open discussion. So if anybody's interested in starting, Trustee Brown?
I've got a question for Paul. What you just mentioned about possibly going forward without affordable housing. So
without the commitment for affordable housing.
Right. So would the potential affordable housing that was on the north side be replaced with market rate housing? Is that the idea?
No.
No.
My understanding is that it would just not require a commitment from the town. They would seek out other funding.
Right.
Yes.
And again, that's where I was going. Was anything discussed about any possibility of a mixed residential component of part market rate, part affordable? For example, we still don't know the size of the summit. They're still considering the number of units. If we ended up using less than the $4 million of DR money for whatever Summit's proposal turns out to be, whether it's just on the Tract A or whether it potentially includes the Bancorp property too, and there were some amount left over, is there a possibility of whatever might be left over going toward the greens and making it part affordable, part market?
I would have to default to the team for that answer, but I would imagine so.
If I recall, they have done some of that in the past. Some percentage of it affordable and some percentage market rate. And my perception of that is we have a shortage of both in town. Has that been discussed at all in terms of numbers?
We've discussed that before with some, on the south side, some market rate, and on the north side being primarily affordable, because I think there was a number of units they wanted to hit with affordable for different funding reasons. And so I can't speak for the team, but that has been discussed, and there is a mix out there currently. It's just not on the north side as far as I can tell.
Because I've tried to get the numbers just one-on-one from a couple of local realtors, and they don't really track this, but even post-flood, the town of Lyons has lost some market rate rental housing as housing prices have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, owners of rental properties are tempted to sell them for top dollar. New owners come in to live there, which of course is their right, and the owners certainly have the right of having held their property for so many years to realize top dollar when they're able to do that. But I think we've lost market rate housing as well as affordable, in my opinion, toward the middle and upper ends of market rate too. So I don't see that as being a deal killer as far as the Greens overall is concerned. I think there's some need, and I think it could add something to the town to do market rate housing. You may attract a different type of resident, but that's not all bad either. And just my background is I sat through a couple of presentations at the PCDC level, so I think I understand how the original idea was proposed. And my thought then, that remains my thought, is the town of Lyons for many years, at least going back to the 2010 comp plan, has pushed for development in the eastern corridor. And the town of Lyons and Longmont worked jointly for a number of years to see what type of interest they could attract from private sector developers to do something with that property before it was decided that Lions would acquire it from Walmart. And they got a few nibbles, but my impression was that nothing ever came through that was really financially viable. And so here we are in 2018, 8 years after the comp plan urged that something be done in that area. And we have what I think, regardless of the details of the proposal are, certainly the experience of these developers in their projects in the past lends itself to flexibility and capability of doing things as markets change and as the highway conditions may change and timeline may change because of the utilities extension out there. Bottom line, I think we have some very quality developers here, and I hate to do anything that would cause them to go away. I think we should continue to explore the possibilities, changing where they may be.
Any other comments? I think we need to hear from everyone on this, so I think I'm just going to ask you to go around the dais. Trustee Miller?
I agree mostly with Mark, but I have a question. Since this was involved, they would be affordable regardless, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So, whatever they...
Somewhere.
Yeah. So, that was my main concern after...
I think they've developed market rate.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah.
I know, yeah. I would like to ask them, but I don't...
But let's get a sense and then...
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in pursuing the Eastern Corridor. I feel like this is a pretty solid development plan for the most part. What I've seen, the newest schematic, minus the issues with the river. So.
I tend to be a patient person in general, but I gotta tell you, housing, and any housing that's not very high end in this town seems to be so hard. My God, it's hard. I hate that it's hard. And I wish we had a better way to more aggressively and assertively move forward with, but, it seems every 2 steps we take forward, we get 1 3/4 steps backwards. We have the DOD issue that comes along, and that's nobody's, well, it is somebody's fault, but. But these things keep getting in the way, and I just hope that we are able to move forward, assertively on some plan, and as soon as we can. And every iteration I've seen in the Eastern Corridor, to me, provides value. I do think that we have to keep remembering that we also have to have the commercial development out here, but the affordable housing and housing, I don't disagree at all with Trustee Browning that mix may be a very good solution out there. And I think that would be fine, particularly if we get affordable housing elsewhere in town. That's a long way of saying that I am supportive. I hope we're able to continue a positive direction with this.
Trustee Farrell?
I really enjoyed that when we saw at the workshop that there's a long-term idea of future growth, of how it could be done and be beautiful, and so long vision. I think that that's a really important concept that we should always keep in mind. I'm concerned about, I think the affordable housing balance, I think is really critical, but, and I liked the idea that you wanted to, I liked how it looked, the idea of putting more affordable homes kind of in the back, but we don't really have another place for our public works. And I don't think we can go from the FEMA process that we went through and cut it down to less than an acre. And I think that's a bummer, because I thought that that design and the number of homes that it increased to was exceptional, but I don't know how we go through that all over again. At this point, I don't see it. So I think that's a concern. And I would say that I'm a little concerned about the second iteration that we received. I liked, you had one exhibit and then you had a second exhibit that's got more buildings kind of in the front along the street. But then I don't see something that really shows the hotel aspect that I also think needs to be a part of our commercial formula. So that's also a huge need that this town has, and a source of revenue that I think is going to be really critical, and it hits a market that we're not serving this town at all, and that concerns me. So those are my two concerns, but I don't want this to die in the water either at all. So, all right, Trustee Gomez.
Unlike Pro Tem Dresch said, I'm not a patient person. As I've said to this board many times prior to this board being seated, that when we couldn't find land, we keep moving forward, we get frustrated when we got going. And I'm glad we are where we are. So, like I said, I am positive. I look positive to moving forward with what we're doing out there. Unlike Trustee Farrell, I'm a little different on if FEMA could move faster, there's a way to make them move faster. I don't mind splitting up, shortening, making smaller the public works building, because we've got land elsewhere that product can be staged. But so if anyone knows a way to speed up FEMA, like in a matter of weeks, that would be beneficial. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But I don't know if that's feasible to do that part like they asked in the last workshop. I like it, and would prefer that after looking at everything, but I see FEMA as a very large obstacle, and not a good one in my book, and lack of patience. I like the idea on the south side, the additional drawings, and I was looking for hotel issues, but there's also other owners of land out there that are more than happy to come to this board, or on their own, if their land's not annexed, to develop their land. And, and sit next to this beautiful development that we've been working on for years. So can't be all up to us and one project possibly. If you get, I like what we see, continue to move forward if we can.
Before I make any comments, the phrase tiny home was used in the latest presentation, so I just want to disclose that my husband is a partner in We Casa Tiny Homes. But as this is still in conceptual stages, I feel like I can be completely objective in this discussion. On that note, there was that small cottage hostel component to their plans. So, We Casa has been really successful as a lodging option, and I think that would be as well. It kind of follows the same guidelines there. So, and then just generally, I've always been really supportive of this plan. I love the integrated retail community component of it. And I think it's a retail concept that's viable and with what's happening with retail storefronts today, because it's a grow center, hydroponic grow center with a grocery and a farm-to-table restaurant and a community that can shop at that grocery. So it just is a fresh retail concept to me that I'd like to see move forward. And then, I agree with Trustee Browning and Drystad on the housing piece. There is a lack of middle-range housing in this town as well as low-income affordable housing. So I wouldn't mind seeing both of those types of housing on this development.
Really good comments. I think it's helpful to kind of hear where everybody's at a little bit. I'm sure it's helpful for the developers as well. I look at the proposal and I think there's some really good strengths and also a few kind of weaknesses to it, but I think overall, I do think it's novel, it fits our community values. I like that there's a plan B for housing still in the picture. I think that, we still have a long way to go with Summit, and keeping as many options open for the long term is still good, although we know there's going to be a timeline on that money at some point. I'm not convinced that this project can meet the timelines necessarily for affordable for the DR funds, even if Summit doesn't work out, just because of the permitting issues we've got with the water treatment plant. I think actually moving forward with residential first might have an impact on our EDA grant, which is where the utilities come from, because that's an economic development grant, and if the first thing goes in is housing, we have to still show how we're meeting the goals of that grant, which is to create jobs. So the component that actually brings the utilities is the economic development component. So what order things go in matters here, because one can't happen without the other, obviously. That said, I do think the most recent proposal particularly, I really wish we could move the water treatment or the public works building, but I just don't think we can, because I really liked how that changed the conceptual layout of that. I just don't know that we have the luxury of trying to make those changes at this stage of the game. Plus, I'm not sure how we would downsize it that significantly. But what I like, even with the new South Side drawing, it's not everything we wanted, but I do think it shows that we're still being open to how can we make the site work with a mix of residential and commercial. And I do think it's still important to us to not create two separate towns, essentially, and that we want to still maintain our downtown district and the core of town, but yet have a vibrant community. So I really like the visioning that went into that and how you looked at how it could grow and expand down the road. I think that's likely to happen, in the next 20 to 30 some odd years. So I do think, I get that businesses follow rooftops. The one downside is I don't feel like it diversifies our commercial offerings much. We're really vested in agricultural and food, farm to table and restaurants, and we're getting more of that. And I think it's okay, potentially, as long as the weddings continue and we have draws that bring people to town that can eat in those restaurants. But the reality is that's a lot of competition in the off-season. So we just have to own what we are, which is a tourist destination, a seasonal economy for the most part. But also, we have to also think about what things do our citizens wish we had. We're losing medical facilities, we're losing, some service components, we don't have industrial spaces. And so those are all things that we've talked about also. Hotel space has also been really key, and this has some creative component, but that's not going to work for everybody who comes here for the clientele we have for the weddings. And so hopefully, by maybe addressing the housing issues, we help meet some of the demand in other ways. But overall, I'm really pleased with the effort that's gone into this. I think you have a good sense of maybe who Lions is. I still question whether the pro forma for the business pro forma is there for some of it, but knowing how seasonal we are. But I definitely think there's enough interest to continue to try to keep working it out and figure out what the next steps are. So I hear pretty much across the board mostly support, and so at this point, if you guys want to come on up, and then we'll let the board answer any maybe specific questions about some of the changes, and now you've heard a little bit of where we're at, and you can talk to us a little more about what you see as next steps. Okay?
If you want the slides, I can pull
I don't
up. You necessarily
Can I just ask how much time you want to have on this item?
Well, we're in pretty good shape. I think we didn't plan for, a robust discussion into lots of detail. This was attempted to kind of take everybody's temperature more or less. And so,
So we have a few slides to go through with more of an explanation on the south side, if you're interested in that, or if you just
why
want
don't
to
we
go
give
right
you
to
5 minutes then to
questions?
set up, and maybe if the board would be willing to take a short recess, you can get situated, figure out what you want to present, and then we'll come back. How about
I'll second that.
Take your time. is here. All right, thank you. I'll turn it over to Paul and his group.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan and trustees. We're delighted to be here again. And I guess before we dive in, it's been really actually quite interesting sitting back, listening to all the diverse things you have to deal with. And Trustee Browning, I must say that in all my years, I've never heard somebody fight for skateboarders the way you did. That's fantastic. I think what we'd like to do is maybe just quickly do a quick overview of the entire process and site as we kind of developed it, and then particularly focusing on the south side. And so we'll start there, and I think we can answer any questions that you have. So I'd love to turn it over to Ronnie and Orchid.
Thanks. Just to remind you, we started with the corridor idea, and next one. And even if it stays as an arterial, this corridor can work as a valuable amenity. And we also, as you may remember, looked at the boulevard. In this, like some of you already mentioned, there's a retail and community functions potential as well as residential potential. Next one. So we went to the south side. It looks like a war zone right now. You can movie there, which tells us that it's not going to be easy. We need a lot of support, and we were just talking about, how can we get that grant and such. On the other hand, there are some interesting structures. Again, we need to figure out if they are structurally feasible. Some of the basements, some of the foundations may be compromised. We'll find that out. But, next one. Our first reaction is that, again, let's have an assembly of uses that support each other. Otherwise, if they were self-standing, they wouldn't work well, but when you put these things together, some market rate housing, some modest accommodation, you already mentioned that. We looked at the hotel in terms of access may be too demanding. We don't know, we can still look at the possibilities. And some event center and retail. This first drawing shows how we can start approaching, because there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the arterial. We may wait a few years figuring out what's going to go there, and then next slide, once we figure out, we can complete and face the arterial or boulevard, whatever it's going to be. We also talked about last time that, the vacated rail easement has some utilities but can be used as part of the frontage road, and there may be creative way to incorporate that to the project and use it as an access. And yeah, that's basically the gist of it. We heard a lot of questions. Maybe we can start answering. One of the big questions was that public works. That's not a deal breaker for us. We can look at different solutions. There may be creative ways to move some of their yards and keep their buildings where they are, or, worse than worse, as they planned. We started with that assumption, and then we said, wait a minute, maybe there's a big opportunity here. So that's how we thought.
Well, I was just going to quickly point out a couple of concepts that are also outlined in the plan, which I'm sure some of you have seen, but maybe it's just worthy of pointing out. And if you just click back a couple images to the this drawing, this image, there are existing structures that have the concrete foundations, which are holding tanks, and then there's an existing multi-story structure on the site. We are looking at ways of reusing those. And if you click to the images ahead, you can see that there's actually buildings in the place of where those structures are. So we're thinking of using those as underground parking. And, our concept there, obviously, all along is to de-emphasize the vehicle. So we have this potential amenity on the site. It's an amenity with a question mark at the end, because we're not sure if the structure is actually would allow us to do this. But we're thinking of using that as a parking structure and putting a platform of building on top of that, which would be predominantly residential. And then, one key concept that's also outlined there is while the parking structures have footprints like this, we are paying special attention to orient the buildings and the spaces in directions that are north and south, and also to break up those buildings into smaller structures that not only provide natural light and ventilation to the units, but also meet some of those visions we talked about in terms of architectural character at the last meeting, which is that smaller structures are more aligned with the character of buildings that are of the typology of types that you have here in town. And just to quickly point out a few other pieces to this, this building F, this is the existing multi-story building, which has some great opportunity for diverse community use, potential restaurant that has some great views from up above. And then there's this chain of smaller buildings that kind of lace what we think is the most fragile edge of the existing waterfront. That's where we think we've seen the most change in the edge of water at this property, which could potentially require great restoration. Those small structures allow for an opportunity to have not great investment there in terms of putting a big building with a big foundation that may or may not be able to handle those conditions, but something that is, as we've been describing, a micro home that could come and go if need be and still serve those greater ideals of a rental opportunity and having direct access to the waterfront. So the last thing is permeability. There's permeability on both sides of the site. So on the north side, we talked a lot about the frontage on the road and then access to open space on the north. Similar kinds of characteristics apply here, that is frontage to the highway and then access to the river. You can see there's west and east connection along the river, implies you can connect that as long as possible, but it is also freestanding, so it could function just as is. And as Trustee Browning had pointed out earlier, there's flexibility. So you're seeing multiple options in relationship to how these buildings might address both the creek and then if you go to the next slide, how they might address the highway. And that is, here's the example of the first frontage road. It could continue on, but we're showing just in this section, you can add that frontage road. It provides opportunity for access, so ingress, egress, for on-street parking, as well as a comfortable environment to have slower driving vehicles, which we think would help bolster the viability of the retail or non-residential space that faces onto that road. There's a really large park, there's a really large plaza here. It relates to the plaza across the street, and then the primary entrances relate. And although the highway is really wide, we think that that's an important key piece, because should in the future there be an opportunity to implement the full boulevard, maybe at some point there's also an opportunity for a traffic light, and that would be a good point for pedestrian crossing. So there's the flexibility component playing out again. It's not everything needs to happen at once for this plan to be totally implemented, but the infrastructure of it is here in concept. So should the stars align and everything come through, the buildings could move even further out into the right-of-way. We've taken kind of a middle ground. Right now we're about 25 feet into what is the 50-foot easement.
So one of the other factors is we are also in the process of trying to put a urban renewal plan on this property. Have you kind of thought about what impact a TIF might have in supporting the development at all, or have you just considered that, or interest in that, not interested in that?
I think there'd be interest in that. I mean, I think, we'd have to see the specifics of it, but yeah, I think we'd definitely be interested in supporting that.
I mean, that's kind of something already in the works that we've been working towards, so we're going to continue to look at the entire area as far as incorporating it into an urban renewal plan. It would be a separate plan.
Is it one for the entire corridor, all through downtown?
Well, we're still in discussions about what the boundaries would be, but the idea is that we might consider including some of the properties adjacent to this that are still in the county, if the county would approve that, because we foresee potential more annexations. It'd be more efficient to do it all at once. So those are still being talked about, and something that urban renewal is currently working on. just so you're aware.
Okay, that'd be great. I think maybe, if Mary, if you want to talk a little bit about Thistle's experience with market rate and that
Sure.
question that came up.
And maybe maybe somebody would like to reframe or just re-ask the question around any of the housing stuff, so I'm speaking to the right point.
Trustee Brown, I
Well,
have one question about
the
that.
possibility was raised if the town, for whatever reason, wasn't able to contribute in the DR funds, that, of course, tax credits are still available.
Right.
And you've done a lot of projects without DR funds in them.
Right.
So if I recall, and I'm doing this from memory, a number of those were mixed market rate and affordable.
We've done, since I've been at Thistle, we've built about 50 homes in 3 different neighborhoods that are for-sale homes, and they're completely a mix of permanently affordable and market rate. So we have a lot of experience in the home ownership side. We have some of our rental property that we've developed has also been market rental and affordable rental, and that's a little more difficult on the economics, but it's definitely doable. I think the getting away from the DR funds and understanding what the board was saying the last time we were here about the inability really to make a commitment to them, flipping that around, it becomes an opportunity because we're not so tied to the time frame. And I completely hear your impatience and second that, and just want you to know that we don't make any money until we're done. We don't make any money until house 45 out of house 46, out of 46 houses. We won't make any money until the last 2 houses are sold. So we get it. We have a sense of urgency, and I think really getting to that purchase and sales contract is what allows us to dig into the issues substantively and thoroughly, where we can provide the answers about the direction to go in. But lacking that sort of boundary, we just, we're just throwing stuff up and seeing what sticks, and things we really like and think are great. But if Summit isn't doing a 9% credit application, I can network throughout all the Boulder County housing providers. We kind of do this anyway, and see who is queuing up for a 9% credit app. We know that Boulder County is going for a 9% app this year, which seems to make it almost impossible to get the 9% app up in Lyons. But they'll probably get those funds. And then every other project that I know of is going after 4% funds. So there might be a nice path to have 9% tax credits here. There might be a nice path to do a different kind of housing. There's Paul has, these guys have pro forma that other housing on the south side. And I love what you said, we really need to look at this as one project. So there's housing on the north side, there's housing on the south side. How do we keep it as integrated as possible? Using the same kind of materials, same kind of look, whatever. How do we create one community out there? And so the long answer is yes, we do have experience doing mixed and market.
I think maybe if I could try to answer a couple other questions just quickly. One is the Public Works building, and I get that that's a huge burden if the funds aren't available for that. I do, however, think that if you could go back a slide to show the north side, that there may be a way to move the Public Works building on, keep this sort of design and structure, and particularly after hearing about the sort of biodiversity as it relates to that canal and the creek back there, and it is a really beautiful place, that maybe the Public Works building goes back here, but maybe they would allow storage or just the yard to still be off the original footprint. I'm not sure, but I think that there would be a way to at least consider, hopefully they can look at that and consider it as a possibility. The other thing is, as far as a hotel and then the tiny homes, if you could go to the next two more slides to show. So part of the reason that we looked at tiny homes or something here is that as the floodplain stands now, we can't build anything permanent in this lower portion. It depends on what the new Talvik becomes when we restore that river edge, what the floodplain would change to. But as it stands now, you could only do something that actually is on wheels. So we thought doing some, really beautifully appointed, some sort of tiny homes as an interim hold for that location could be a good play, which is kind of why we went down that road. Let's see. Oh, more diversity in retail. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I feel like my challenge in every building that we do, and I do a lot of retail, is to try to find a way to make buildings work without alcohol and weed. and ones that you provide amenities to community. And so I think understanding what those needs are and really going target after specific tenants, I think is the way we would have to approach it. So I get that as a challenge, and I just think when the market plateaus, that all those restaurants are really, really going to be struggling. So I agree with there. And then I guess just the final thing is, we're at a place where we're excited to move forward and continue to invest resources in really getting solid answers to some of your questions. And we're ready to keep going.
So I'm going to, in the spirit of trying to make sure we're really clear with our direction, I'm going to ask for a motion to direct staff to move forward with the purchase and sale agreement, and we can hear how the motion goes. And we'll be going to make the motion. I believe that's the right next step, correct? If we want to move forward.
If you want to move forward,
okay.
yes.
I would move that we direct staff to move forward with a to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement with the Greens East proposed developers.
I'll second the motion.
Further discussion? I guess my only comment is, this has really morphed a lot from the beginning to the end. I think as we get into kind of real transactions here, I think the public will start to take a stronger interest. And so we really do need to start nailing down what it is we're doing and really working toward a common goal. We totally understand that, there's some flux here around how many units and what kind of units and exactly where and all that, but I think we want to stay fairly close to what we think our concept is and what our goals are as we go through the public processes for zoning and all of those types of steps. Because I do think that's where we'll kind of, people will start to dig through everything and say, okay, well, wait a minute, it was this, and now it's this, and what exactly is it? And I did write an article for the paper last week in the Redstone, just to kind of say, here's the concept, and here's what it is, and not getting a lot of questions, quite honestly, which can be a good thing, and sometimes not a good thing, just you never know where people, and you don't know where people are, but I think people expect development out here. They know this is what we've been focused on for a long time. I don't think any of us knew really going in what we might get through this process, so I think I'm really pleased with the concepts and certainly the effort you guys have put into it. I still think, the housing has become a stronger component, and I think we're going to have some, just kind of working through that in terms of how's this going to feel for the town. People are going to be really interested in how much growth are we okay with once they start to get into the details. But other than that, I think we appreciate what you've been putting into this and bringing it forward. So if there's no other discussion, I would go ahead and call for
Let me add one thing too. I think the ability of these developers to be flexible is important, because any developer looking at this has to realize that what ultimately happens here is dependent not on just what they do or what their sources of financing do, but it's dependent on some decisions by CDOT, by FEMA, by the town, perhaps by Boulder County if you get into the ERA situation, and state permitting agencies as far as the utilities are concerned. So their willingness to put this type of resources in this, recognizing that there are a lot of different players here that they have no control over, to me, says a lot for them.
Totally agree with that. I think that I just know, having gone through lots of different development processes, that you'll get the people who say, you know what, we're going to end up with fast food chains no matter what we do out there. So, so people will still kind of not believe things are real until things are so we'll hear those concerns about that. And so, I think we want to hopefully be representing, what our plan is, that's all.
We planned a big party out there while we were waiting for the meeting to start, so we got a plan to bring it to the public.
Parties are good here.
Parties are good. We love parties.
All right, I'm going to call for the vote. I'm sorry. Your question. Sorry. Yes,
I
sir.
just wanted to comment that the way that Trustee Bonnie phrased the motion for the town to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement, I take to mean that the negotiations would certainly be driven by the best interest of the town, but also to enable creativity and flexibility, as they indicated. I just wanted to say that to see, make sure everybody's in agreement that that's sort of embedded in the motion.
May I make one comment to that?
Sure, go ahead.
Honestly, we're looking for a partner in the town, right? I mean, I don't think we can go through this process, particularly with all of the different players involved, and not have the town be your partner as you journey through it. So, to that point, I mean, it has to work for the town, it's got to work financially, it's got to work for everybody involved, but, we certainly don't want to be here battling the whole way through. That's not what we do.
No, I totally hear that, and I think, I don't think that we say we'll take the $2 million or whatever plus off the table and not expect you to come and say, well, here's what we're going to need.
Mm-hmm.
We've been through a little bit of this. We get that there are things the town will have to offer to help us along. But we also have some agreements that we're kind of bound to at this point and find our own financing, strings. That tie our hands a little bit, but I think we also know what things we do have, what levers we do have to pull, and so that's why I kind of want to make sure we talk about all the options that could offer some support for the project. And my experience is, once we get behind something, we say we're behind it, and until it can't work anymore. So hopefully we want to all be successful, and we don't want to waste your time either, so that's why I thought it was important. Let's kind of get our thoughts on the table so we all know where we're at.
I do think when the response to the RFP was favorable, and it included the 2.9, I think that's why, in terms of those funds for the affordable, I think that's why we went down that road. And then hearing that maybe our understanding of that level of commitment was different, then, that's why I think it's continued to morph, but we're still very interested in moving forward.
No, we're glad you're still at the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, open votes. Yeah, that passes 7-0. Thank you very much. We have one more general business item, so I'll turn it over to staff.
Yeah,
So, in your packet you have a list of priorities that was developed by the staff for the Transportation Improvement Program. The Transportation Improvement Program is a 4-year fiscally constrained program managed by Dr. Cog to distribute, if you will, federal funds for transportation projects. This year, they have changed their program at Dr. Cog to match other MPOs throughout metropolitan planning organizations, where they are not evaluating all the projects themselves. They are having some of the evaluation occur at the local level and some of that negotiation occur at the local level. So they, as part of that, they have asked each county to come up with two working groups, one which is a electeds and one that is made up of staff. And so there's a technical group that has been working on kind of how we evaluate the projects. And then I think it's Connie, you've been sitting on the forum that is going to kind of guide how they evaluate the projects. And so each of the technical members had put together a list, initial list of their projects, and this is that initial list. And we are bringing it to you today to look at the list and see if there are priorities with, or if we're missing something, or, you know, just about it, see if those are the right priorities, see if those are the right projects. The number one project there would be the one that was submitted for the last tip. In 2016, the Broadway improvements between 5th and 3rd, which would add pedestrian improvements as well as parking along that area. And it would change the nature of the frontage road where people park, and potentially allow for some more expression of businesses along Broadway by creating a more inviting environment. It could also slow down the cars by having parking on the street there. So that would be one that would go, so let me take a step back. There are regional projects that should have a regional impact, and those are funded, I forget how much money is going to those. I think it's 20 million. And then there are sub-regional projects in Boulder County. There's $18 million that are going to be evaluated within the sub-region. And they'll be evaluated via the forum, the sub-regional forum, and then they'll make recommendations to Dr. Cog, who will make the final decision. We're not quite sure how they'll make the final decision. So they are asking for our projects.
So I'll add a little bit to that.
Thank you.
So there's still some unknowns to how we're going to approach the sub-regional projects. And we're really competing with our other towns and cities within Boulder County. What sounds like a lot of money isn't going to go very far when it comes to transportation. The other thing we need to think about is that we have to know where the match for the matching funds comes from, and we need to have, we need to know it's there. It can't be, well, we're going to go apply for another grant or we're going to find it somewhere else. We have to be able to say this is where the match is coming from and those funds are really available.
A letter of commitment.
That, or, yeah, it has to be pretty firm. So the larger the project and the larger the match, we have to keep that in mind, because if we don't really have $400,000 to match the Broadway project, and there are some limits as to where that money can come from, so you can't match it without the federal money, for example, because this is, so Dr. Cog money is like DR money, it's last money in. So you have to fund that other stuff through other sources that aren't coming from the same federal pot, without getting too detailed here. But, so strategically, one, we haven't seen the other lists of projects. So as we talk, there's one elected official from each municipality or town or city or whatever in the group. We'll learn a little bit about kind of what everybody's thinking and what projects we might be bringing to the table. But depending on how large and how regional some of those projects are, and that's, I think, our biggest challenge is to show what's the regional impact of our project. Because at the end of the day, it still has to meet Dr. Cog's criteria, which is that it has a regional impact for the Denver metro area. And we are literally so far, we are the furthest point outside of the Denver metro area that's included in Dr. Cog that we're not even really technically on their map for Dr. Cog, which I've been trying to get changed for a couple of years. So just keeping that in mind, we probably need to focus a little bit on the, we got the money to do the Main Street improvement because it's an arterial to Rocky Mountain National Park. So I think, when you look at this list, you got to really think regional. That would be the one thing I would say is, we may have the project that will have the biggest benefit for us locally, but if it doesn't have a big regional benefit, it could still get shot down, and then whatever we put on the table, we may know where we're getting matching funds from. So, just a couple of good ways to look at it.
Yeah, they have something like 9 evaluation criteria. Regional is the big one. but there are also, serving vulnerable populations, mobility, transit ridership, even bike share ridership. So there's a lot of kind of elements that go into it. And we haven't gotten to the point in the technical committee where we're evaluating these yet at that level, but we're starting to try to put bubbles with, a pie with 4 pieces so that we can say this one would rank higher.
So the priorities that you have laid out here, so the multimodal trail, no, I'm not looking at the right one, I'm sorry.
That's the map.
Yeah, something all of a sudden got really funky.
Oh.
Anyway, you've got the priorities listed, and I see that on the map itself, Broadway streetscape is one, downtown traffic study. Are these prioritized according to how we impact the region? That's what you're...
What do we think? Do we agree
with this
list? Would we change the priorities?
We tried to rate them by what the regional priorities were because they were on regional plans, or on regional roadways. So the traffic study would impact the traffic on the way to Estes Park, so it would be a regional impact. Everybody from the metro area goes up there. The Highway 7 trail was on Boulder County's connection map. The Lions, the underpass at 36 and 66 connects 2 of the planned regional connections in the DRCOG document already. One is the Lions Boulder Trail and one is the Lions Longmont Trail. So those 2 are regional in nature. They also would connect to our eastern corridor, but they also want to know what the overall impact is. So when you put in an underpass, what is that overall impact? Since we don't really have anybody out there except for what we're developing now, it would be, a few years before that rolls in. So before people start using that underpass to get through our trail into town.
Another view might be they start using it tomorrow because that whole, for a cyclist, that's a very dangerous, scary place to do anything with.
Yeah.
So if you're coming north from Boulder and you want to go through there, it'll be wonderful to be able to go right down under the river, up onto a path, and then hit back on the road a little later. And then going the other way would be.
It was paved. Yeah.
Yeah. And right now, and I believe that somewhere in here, there is some thought about putting bike lanes in that last little, suicide stretch between 66 and I guess almost to Stone Canyon, not quite, but to the harbor stroke. That's a tough stretch for cyclists and motorists.
I think the one thing, have we identified at all where the local mass would come from for the Broadway streetscape?
We haven't. It was in our budget previously. When I spoke to Victoria, she said it was allocated out of our internal budget, I believe. There can be money from CDOT, but I don't know if they would spend it on this. The Highway 7 trail, CDOT is going through and reevaluating all of Highway 7 from top to bottom right now. And by 2019, they should have a design for that. So in the 2020-2023 timeframe, it could, that could be something that is funded, or at least partially funded through the state.
I don't know if I would see them doing this, because it's more of a streetscape plan versus transportation. It's not maybe as transportation focused. I would see them doing more like
trail, not that.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if I would see them funding any part of number 1. I do think that they may be willing to fund part of number 2. with a traffic study out of maybe their allocated funds. The other thing I was just going to mention too is that there was, with this legislative session, some additional transportation funds approved by legislators that will probably get us an extra $40,000 a year in money toward transportation that we can use locally however we want. So that's money we can also set aside. Now, there's also discussion of the TIP group of potentially asking communities to allocate portions of the sub-regional to a regional project potentially. So, which I made clear I would need to be able to bring that back for board approval when it starts getting in. I mean, it's one thing to support a vision from the region that is going to take regional funds from DRCOG that we have no real shot at. It's another thing to take sub-regional funds that we do have a shot at, and say, sure, we'll pitch ours in. So that would need our board support. So we're still all figuring this out because it's a brand new process for all of us to do it this way. But I think so far it's been a good discussion. People have been really collaborative. So I think we just need to nail down, what, $2 million probably seems like a lot for Lions out of a small pot, considering we're sharing it with Lafayette, Louisville, Boulder, Longmont, and I mean the asks are like we need rail stations and we need things that are big, and projects like for 287, things that have been on hold for 20 years. So we may have a better chance of getting something if we don't go with our biggest project.
Yes.
Potentially, if we want to. I think every community will get something. It's just a matter of how much. So I don't have any problem asking for the big number, but I think we also need to have what the number 2 project should be one we also really care about and think has a real regional impact. So a little strategy and kind of just being ready for the discussions at the time is what we need. So unless anyone wants to really advocate, I mean, I think our top 2 seem like the right top 2 to be ready with, because I think staff should also dig into these and really say, okay, if we were awarded this is where the match would come from. And we also would want to get CDOT support for anything we're going to propose, because we will need letters of support from all the other stakeholders.
That's right, yes.
So there's some legwork too to go into kind of flushing these out to make sure they're viable and others on board, which I think we did for the Broadway project last time. So we probably have more of that done than talking about. The study seems pretty small. And we can maybe get more than one project. I don't know that it's necessary that we would only get one.
Now, the parking study also, the preliminary draft has been released and is recommending a roundabout at 2 different areas. So we could use that as a, use the study to evaluate that. 2 different locations.
See that? Trustee Federal and Trustee Miller?
I guess what would help me to understand is I mean, I read through this, but I almost could use a verbal description of what we would hope to get out of a Broadway streetscape, and then the downtown traffic study. What is the goal out of those 2 things? I looked at these maps, but I found it to be hard to visualize.
I can talk about the streetscape a bit.
Okay.
The traffic study is somewhat of Joe's brainchild.
Yeah.
The streetscape would do a number of things. It would improve the pedestrian infrastructure along there. It would make it safer. It would also add parking to our downtown. So we would increase parking for those downtown businesses. It would encourage businesses to front on the Broadway side as well, because it would allow that improvement. Those are double-sided lots that are allowed to do that. It would most likely slow down people from driving rapidly through town at that point because of the on-street parking, where they race from, they race through town to get out. They don't,
Yeah.
You can hear it.
It's
from
doing what we
sitting
did on
here.
Main Street for the Mojos on Broadway.
So the back of the businesses,
Uh-huh.
we're changing it in such a way so that they can also be somewhat front
They could front on there.
businesses, is what you're meaning.
Mhm.
So it's addressing parking along those businesses on that side, just, and helping to slow down traffic, but it'd still be a two-lane road.
It'd still be a two-lane through road.
Okay.
And maybe a place where bikes would go along there.
Okay.
It would add parking for the park as well. So it could improve the pedestrian crossings. So it would make that safer as well.
There's a drawing that we had done when we submitted this last time, so maybe it would be
We've got
helpful
it.
to send that around.
Yeah, I can send that
It
around.
would really make the area so much more attractive and really expand the downtown footprint.
Would the businesses also want that?
There's been at least one business that wanted to front on that, but they can't figure it out with the way the road is now, and the fact that the auto uses it for their auto parking. So they would have to, it was a guy that came in and wanted to buy 2 lots and redevelop the buildings and put in some housing.
And it would use that frontage road a little bit. So like if you just
frontage
picture
would
the
be-
car wash, our property line actually ends at the edge of the car wash.
Yes.
So it is going to impact businesses to some degree, but if somebody would build a new car wash out on the eastern corner, we could talk about a need for, so it would take some of that, and the auto that would be a sidewalk and parking.
I see.
Instead.
Yeah. So
So that helps me, and then if you could just do a brief of what a traffic survey is going to.
traffic study, did I say survey?
No, I like to mix words.
It's getting late.
The primary goal of the traffic study would be to try to get 2 lanes going out of town and on the 5th from Main Street. And several of the trustees came up with a suggestion that we eliminate the northbound movement from US 7 5th Avenue between Broadway and Main Street, essentially forcing all that traffic to make a right onto Broadway and then make a left on the 4th and then back to Main Street, which would then give us the option of doing a double right going out of Main Street on the 5th. So basically creating a large roundabout.
Okay.
With that idea and just removing that, and hopefully we could remove a bottleneck. But again, we'd have to study that to see if that would even be a possibility.
So
we have a few options.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think we would need to have a lot of discussion, because I think you would see businesses have some concern about just trying harder to move everyone through town faster.
It actually could have less visibility.
It could have a lot of negative impacts. I think.
Right. It's just something to look at and try and study and see what happens.
But I just came from Grand Junction where they have roundabouts everywhere, and they really are invested in that, and it takes a little getting used to. I'll be honest, I wasn't crazy about it, but as I was there for 2 days, by the second, and it's like I had the hang of it, and I was like, oh, it's actually pretty functional. They have them right off the highway. You get off the exit, and you're tossed into a roundabout right off the bat. So I think we do need a study to kind of look at what are all the options of changing the way traffic flows, and we are going to be the bottleneck of all bottlenecks when they widen 66. And so we have to figure out a better way to get people through town, and or just help them slow down, and but maybe not tie them up on one artery. I think that's true. Yeah, good.
I just had a technical question on the wording here. Is it IE? In other words, is it specific? It est these 2 things, or is it EG?
Yeah. Well, read it.
Well, it makes a difference. I mean,
yeah, it does. You're right.
Yeah. That's
what are the 2 things?
The way it's stated now is IE means id est. These specific things.
Yes.
The other is exemplum gradius, which would mean, for example,
I get that.
outstanding examples.
What are the 2 things, though?
The first two.
Is
you
it
touched.
specifically only to do a two-way, only study two-way turn on Main and the roundabout?
No.
Or are you looking at solutions
TG.
to, okay.
Thank you.
That and at 10 o'clock, that's impressive.
All right, would anyone like to suggest a different top two? I don't know that we necessarily need to put them in the exact order at this stage, but I think, does anybody feel like these are not the right two priorities to kind of keep at the top of the list?
I just think that although it's a really high, expensive option, is the either the Longmont to Lyons Regional Trail or the Longmont or Boulder to Lyons Regional Trail, or both, because we are dealing with like so many bicycles all the time, which not that they would all ride on there, but to have just a way for people to even walk to Longmont safely if they wanted to would be fabulous. I mean, or drive their golf cart, I don't know. I mean,
Let me just have this challenge with putting those two at the top, is I don't think that we even own all the property
You
to
don't
make
think-
that work.
okay,
So we'd be putting all our money into something that couldn't happen for a really long time, most likely. I don't disagree with you at all, because they're important projects, but we would be, like the Lyons to Longmont Trail goes through CMEX property that isn't going to be free for 2 decades, probably.
right, but don't we have a easement all the way to Longmont with our utility?
Not where the plan is for the trail. It goes
Oh.
through property that's not going to be acquired for quite a while. So, I think there's a couple sections in Boulder as well that they're still trying to figure out what
The
that
Boulder is
actually has
really
to be.
difficult.
It's
We've
complicated.
tried for 20 years.
So I think Boulder and Longmont would be equally excited to move those forward, but I don't think we'll see those on their list.
I think Longmont's trying.
They might try.
They're thinking about it. They've got a lot of that right away already, but it's
Not
all the way to the
Lyons,
ponds.
yeah.
But that
Yeah, I
it's
was
not
gonna say not to Lyons.
not all the way to Lyons, no.
Mhm.
But to the ponds, the Sawhill Pond. No, I forget what the name of those ponds is.
Come across them.
But that's actually good, so if they get that portion done,
Right.
it will, and we do some development, that will create then a higher need.
And with
Yeah.
with the underpass, maybe one of the kind of give and takes is we could get local funds from the developers out there.
Mhm.
You know, whoever that is. I know Tebow's sitting on a lot out there. I'm not sure what he's planning to do.
Well, it's true, there are some more annexations, those are opportunities for us to, consider what other needs we have. So, I'd like to keep moving, so does anybody have anything else that would change about this? I mean, we're not locked in yet at this point, but we do want to make sure we're ready, so that when the conversation happens, I don't always know exactly where things are at these meetings. I show up and then like here's where we are, and it's kind of figuring it out as you go. Trust you, Candace.
I would say, based on what you just said, on the trail, does that go for the underpass at 3666 also? Yeah, I know we talked about that as a board, as soon as I came on, we were talking about that as we
Quite
were thinking
honestly,
big.
I would have a hard time selling that.
Okay.
Just because there's so many needs
Yeah.
that this is just not.
I'm just looking at but
Yeah.
can I say, Barney, no, it's not 10:30 yet. Pro Tem, President said about the safety issue and the bike, yeah, I just see that, you get that piece done, that helps us, it helps developers further down, but I understand, thank you.
I agree.
My-
They're all worthy. There's nothing on here that wouldn't be great. I'm just trying to think about, especially the ones that have, I think they would be expecting us to bring something like these top two. Now, if someone else proposes one of these trail connections and wants support for it, I'm happy to chime in and say, we're all about trail connections, but we're going to be trading off something else. So we just have to keep that in mind. So I need some ability to kind of just read the room and read the conversation and figure out what do we think is going to get the best. And Paul will be doing the same on the technical side, or whoever's attending those meetings. So I think I hear you though. I get it. I think we'd be happy with anything, but let's try to get what we think has the biggest impact.
I think the top three would like it, right?
Okay. All right. Good. Thanks. So we have one item removed from consent, so I'll turn it over to Trustee Long.
So I don't know if anyone can answer my question. Well, Deb, you probably can, but I first wanted to know, I thought we hired an HR person. Did that person leave? Or
We did
never
to begin
did?
with, and then that person left.
Okay.
And now we have another one that will start tomorrow. So
Oh,
this
okay.
was just, there was money left in there, so they extended it for us until the end of the year, is basically what it is.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. The second thing I wanted to bring up, in the memo, it said that after the funds subside for this position, that we would absorb it in the town's budget, but it would be a part-time position. So I just wanted to pull it because I just wanted to say, and have the board be thinking about it at budget time, that I really think that needs to be a full-time position. For one, it creates a conflict of interest because my sense is it all falls on Victoria and Deb when there's not a person in that position. So, and then, it's extra workload on Victoria that she really should be delving out to somebody else to do, and that conflict of interest piece. And I think we have enough HR, not in a bad way, but we do have a lot of turnover. We have a lot of grant-funded people versus actual staff, and that can create some issues as well. I just think a full-time position is warranted. So I just wanted to bring that up and just have you guys think about it when we get to budget time.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Oh yeah, I'll move that we approve Resolution 2018-44.
I'll second. All right, any further discussion? I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. That's good reminders to start thinking about budget. Especially early, right? All right, I'll call for the vote. 7-0 passes. Thank you. We can do a quick round of trustee reports. Trustee Browning, you want to start?
Sustainability Futures Commission did not meet in the last month or so because they had a task force working on the cleanup day, which went pretty well considering the conditions. We worked really hard in the mud, but a lot of people seemed grateful that we were there.
Trustee Miller?
I don't really have anything right now. We have our next HSAC meeting on 29th at 3:30. 3:30.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Sorry. 22nd. Yeah.
I had a great opportunity to attend a Dr. Cog meeting, and the group was very welcoming, very nice group. It was a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, not being familiar with all the topics, but it's definitely clear why that is a group that is very important for us to be a part of and understand some great learning opportunities. Just a couple of things, notes of interest. One is that they have a really great summary of legislation, which I'm trying to carve out of the document and maybe to make available to everybody here. Also on census, we need to make sure that we have notified the census folks of the annexations. There aren't people involved, particularly a couple maybe.
We sent them the boundary adjustment.
They do have boundary adjustments, okay. And the other was the Bike to Work Day, which is part of I know Kim and Ariel are already aware of that, but they're looking at it even broader context in terms of a way to go program, which involves things other than just bicycles. So, there may be some creative things we could do here in Lyons. I don't know that we'd make a big impact with a Bike to Work Day because everybody likes to work, plays like to work.
Golf cart to work day.
But it may be one of those, anything but a bike, anything but your motor car to work day or something, I don't know. But it was an interesting experience, and anybody who gets that opportunity, I think should take it. It was the last meeting in that room, they're moving to a new building in June.
Milton, thank you for attending on my behalf. Trustee Bell?
So just a few updates on the Hearts of Lions. We have 19 submissions of sculptures for our outdoor art collection in town.
Wow.
Really something, yes. 3 of those are legacy pieces. That means they were donated to our town, so we will be able to be keeping those. 1 is on consignment, and then 1 is kind of on loan, so those 2 are still for sale. There are 14 pieces. They're kind of going to be going through a review. Some of them, it sounds like, are kind of on the fragile side. And these are honorariums, and that's kind of basically that we pay them over a 2-year period. The first year it's about $325. It's kind of like a commission to letting us have their art, and then we do it again the second year. But what's happened is now that we have so many pieces, it sounds like the commission is a little bit short on funds to be able to pay for the stones, the little plaques, nameplates. So they're going to be coming on the 4th meeting when they make their presentation and asking for a little bit of extra money. And it has been identified where that could come from. It's from the general fund, advertising and publishing budget under the economic development area. It sounds like some money came over from last year. It's sitting there, and they're just going to ask for a small amount of that. Then 2 other projects. There's a lot of things, but I'm just going to highlight 2 of them. There's a woman who has recently moved to Lyons. Her name is Anita Miller, and she has proposed an idea for Bell of Happiness installation. And the original attraction is known for bringing people together to ring an old Polish sailing ship's bell and thereafter enjoy everlasting happiness, peace, and harmony. So it's a bell that would go on perhaps one of our bridges, like perhaps at Bone Park, and people can go in and ring the bell or add some element to it, similar to the locks, the love locks that they do on bridges like in Florence, and I think there's one in Paris. So that would be something that we could potentially have, and this woman is in the process of working with us. And then another one that I just think is super exciting, actually, is painting power boxes by local artists. So some of our street utility, massive ugly boxes, why not commission some artists to donate their time and paint them and add that as another source of art around our town.
And I have a request to go out and attack that bridge on 5th Avenue at the same time. The railing, you could tell, used to be purple. I was like, get some high school girls, our youth these days, to come out with their paintbrushes and come up with that sounds great.
So there's a lot more to come, but I'm going to let them save some more information for their meeting with you.
Good. Thank you.
Good. Ecology Board, you just heard from me. Meeting tomorrow, rescheduled from last Wednesday, tomorrow 6:30. Come on. And you sent me to the UEB, so now I've got a list. A bunch of things came together. Something that they're concerned about when we look at the Longs Peak sewer replacement is when it comes down, there's, depending on what county site you look at, there's questionable property ownership, some property, some property that the north-south road there sits on, and if there's current easements in place, you may be aware, but they're concerned about that. They'd like to see that taken care of with easements if needed prior to we start the project and run into like the Bone Park issue. So I get to go acquired land through tax liens, paid them, and homeowners up there claims different things, and there are road systems and property on easement. I don't know. They just want to make sure things are cleared up. So I guess something they've been waiting for might have happened with the changeover of finance directors, a correction of the electric fund starting balance. So that's something they're looking for. The water leak that was mentioned by the UEB some years back, they're just looking into it. Saved them, looks like the figures are out from what they looked at in the meters, saved us about, or cost us about $32,000 roughly. It was fixed, so it's now repaired. Monthly usage now is reflecting what it was prior to when someone thought there was a leak, and obviously there was. Leaks are a major issue, and we really have no way to know if something is leaking. So the possibility of finding different locations to add possibly a flow meter. Like say once you leave town, you go up to Eagle Canyon, if there's a meter there that we read once a month, and all of a sudden it's 10,000 gallons over, well obviously we probably have a leak somewhere from that point forward. We have nothing like that at this point. So something to consider. Don't know the cost. They estimate the cost of flow meters aren't all that much, but to install them and find a good place for them, different story. Let's see, what else? Based on some of the projects, now that stormwater is an issue and we have funds and no positions were added for care of storm water sewer cleaning, that's going to get added to obviously town staff's current times. They would really love to see the board not add any more projects to staff until we catch up on what was prior to 2013 and just after, like meters being installed that aren't installed. That I remember former trustee Kerr was saying that 2 years we've been saving money in the budget, we're not putting them in. So adding something the SFC is coming to us with the one service provider for garbage is like, let's stick to what we said we were going to do, because they're saying that if things aren't getting done, we can't monitor things the way they want to and we should be. So,
All right.
There we are.
Thank you. Trustee
The EDC did not meet in May, and we are still heavily recruiting some members. Tiffany Martindale, she actually held a kind of like a informational meeting today that I wasn't able to attend, so I'm going to catch up with her and Laura Gilson, the chair of the EDC, tomorrow to find out how that meeting went. But I know she was expecting anywhere between like 10 to 20 participants, and she had a representative from the Main Street program attend the meeting to kind of just talk to people about what is the Main Street program, because there's so much confusion. People think it's focused on just old downtown and not, the entire Main Street corridor. So it was an informational session and a recruiting tool at the same time, so I'll report back on if that worked or not.
Good. All right. Well, I've had just more of a ceremonial couple of weeks of events. We had the governor in town this week, and it was really nice. He did a little bill signing here at Oscars, so it was nice to have him back. He was very anxious to hear about how our recovery was going, and had a lot of state representatives around, so that was nice, well attended. And then, I think most of you were here for the bridge cutting before this meeting. It's all done together. But then I was out of town for a stretch, so I missed the last Parks meeting, so I don't have much to update other than, again, thanks to Mayor Burton for going to Dr. Cog. It's a little bit of an effort to get to that meeting, but it's really worthwhile, so I appreciate that. So other than that, unless there's anything more, do you?
Question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we scheduled for May 31st?
Yes,
Laura meeting?
Thank you, I was going to make that, but we do have a Laura meeting May 31st.
Oh, really?
So make sure you have that on your schedule. Other than that, does the clerk have any other action items you want to run through?
You want the Parks Director to give a report at the next meeting. The Ecology Board is looking for support of the current policy and recommendations for weed control. And then you want to cost them to run cost you. Staff input to include the GIS. And that's, I don't know, are we going to want that on there?
Yeah, I'll talk to him about it. I already
to take it to the board first, is what I told them, for you folks to approve before we put it.
That's what he tried to do today.
Well, we said
no,
we
no.
need to hear from staff before.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to see the final result, and get that presented to you for
Okay.
approval before we can do anything with it.
We already have all that data.
Well, they're adding some ecologically sensitive things that I think the board really needs to look at.
Okay.
Marcus will be working on the amendable letter to the BOT for Planet Bluegrass Farm and purchase sale agreement for the greens. And Paul's gonna send the board the Broadway plan drawing.
Okay, great. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.